In this world, bloodline, talent, and caution are the most important things to become a maid. Unfortunately for Lloyd, no amount of caution will ever be enough to make up for his complete lack of talent. His instructor tells him that magic will never be part of his life and uses his own to eliminate him, while his body is completely scorched. Lloyd still loves magic so much that he calls the spell used to end his life magnificent. He admires the magic that can only be used by nobles and even gives it a name, Bella. His only wish was that he had been able to learn more about magic, even if he couldn't really use it well. Lloyd then dies but immediately wakes up, realizing he's surrounded by some giants. He tries to defend himself with a fireball spell, but his hands are tiny. To our surprise, the fireball actually works. Outside, we see a great celebration happening, because the birth of the 7th prince of the Kingdom of Salem has just been announced. Lloyd has reincarnated as a prince, and everyone is shocked by the amount of destruction caused by the baby's fireball. Years later, Lloyd grows a little and hides from his maids. He's invited to take part in an assault, but our boy is far too busy trying to escape from the ladies. The knights decide to leave him alone, because, unfortunately for Lloyd, he's much younger than his brothers, which places him out of the line of succession. One of the knights believes gaining the boy's favor wouldn't be worth the effort, but the other knight explains why he's mistaken. Lloyd is insane. He spoke right after being born, reads spellbooks instead of picture books, and as a true knight, he even refused to drink from the breast. Lloyd was reborn a true prodigy, but the knight adds something even more important. Lloyd might be the reincarnation of the great mage known as William Bardot. William is also known as the father of sorcery, so it sounds a bit ridiculous. Lloyd confirms that he did reincarnate, but in truth, he was just a commoner in his past life. He has no idea why he was reborn, or how he got so lucky to become the 7th son of a privileged royal family. In fact, Lloyd doesn't care about bloodline or glory. He's simply following the same philosophy he had in his previous life, which is to discover just how much incredible magic exists to be explored in the world. He's basically the Lara Croft of magic. Moving on, his new life comes with a massive library for the little nerd to enjoy. But Silpha, the maid, stops him. The two begin to fight, but Lloyd doubts that he needs to learn the way of the sword, since he has no chance of reaching the throne anyway. But Silpha is quick to point out that there's more to life than just royal succession. She's been in charge of Lloyd's education for the past 3 years. Her purpose in life became teaching him everything he needs to know, including sword fighting. Lloyd realizes the training won't end unless he puts on a good performance, so he strikes her harder. Silpha is happy to see that he's getting stronger with each passing day, but Lloyd reflects on how she always holds herself back. Lloyd is a magical genius and uses control-type magic to track Silpha's every movement. From her perspective, it's like she's fighting herself. But this mischievous little nerd just thinks he's cheating to get back to reading. They keep fighting, and Lloyd admits Silpha beats him in strength, stamina, and height. He can copy her techniques using magic, but those other factors leave him at a disadvantage. Most of the time, he ends up losing. Lloyd then decides it's the perfect moment to try out his experiment of the day. He uses a spell for physical enhancement and levitation. The difference is instantly noticeable, and Lloyd combines physical and magical attacks to fight in a more balanced way. The fight intensifies, and Lloyd becomes a very confident boy. He's been fighting Silpha perfectly, as if she were his mirror image. So now he's convinced he can win if he just does something unexpected. He releases his tracking spell and catches Silpha off guard with an unpredictable move. He apologizes for needing to end the fight right there, but he's thinking about getting back to his reading. And surprisingly, Silpha blocks the attack and does something even more shocking. She realizes he was cheating. She defeats Lloyd and points out that the difference in reach was obvious. He used levitation to compensate for his height, and even made his wooden sword longer. His anger quickly turns into admiration when he realizes that he can use 2 spells at once, something that even court mages find incredibly difficult. But in reality, Lloyd had actually been using 4 spells at the same time. After that, Lloyd is forced to take a bath, even though all he really wants to do is study. The maids warn him not to spend too much time in the library, since a demon that once lived there could devour him. A long time ago, that library was almost completely destroyed, and after the sacrifice of countless mages, the demon behind the attack was sealed inside a book. His name is Grimoire. Silpha is certain that Lloyd wouldn't be afraid of something like that, but he pretends to be trembling with fear. In truth, Lloyd is just excited to find this forbidden library. That night, he uses wind magic to reflect the light around him and become invisible. A guard tells another to stay alert, since this is the forbidden library, the one that could shake the entire kingdom. Not to mention that demons still sealed in there. All of that sounds perfect to Lloyd, who, just like Lara Croft, loves a good adventure. So, he enters the basement. The guards, who are not exactly the brightest, are convinced that no one can get through. Even if someone did, 10 mages cast their most powerful spells to create an unbreakable ceiling barrier, right at the basement entrance. But that's nothing to Lloyd, who casually breaks through the barrier without the slightest effort. Once inside, he's amazed by the forbidden library. As he browses through the books, he immediately notices that the grimoire has revealed itself. Lloyd introduces himself, and the grimoire asks if he would be kind enough to break the seal. The seal has already been wearing down due to time, so it's just a matter of when it will break. The grimoire tries to seduce Lloyd by offering him an infinite amount of gold, but is shocked to see that Lloyd realized it was just a cheap illusion. Even more surprising, the grimoire sees that Lloyd is completely calm. Lloyd explains that this kingdom is where he studies magic, and he's not about to let some dangerous demon destroy it. The grimoire tries to defend himself, saying he holds no grudges against people anymore, but Lloyd doesn't fall for that. The grimoire then makes another offer: he'll teach Lloyd ancient spells, magic that's been lost for centuries, and now he finally gets the boy's attention. The grimoire realizes that Lloyd has an incredible amount of talent, which makes Lloyd remember his past, when he was told that magic would never smile upon him. And now, with a noble body, Lloyd declares that he can finally explore the full potential of magic. But the grimoire finds the way he talks about himself kind of strange. Without hesitation, Lloyd lifts the seal and prepares to learn the ancient magic. But the grimoire, being the sly and devious demon that he is, suddenly attacks him with an absurdly powerful spell and blasts it right in Lloyd's face, asking if that was lesson enough. Thinking Lloyd is finished, the grimoire starts planning his next move. But to his surprise, Lloyd is still alive, and more than that, he's thrilled by the magic, and even hopes the grimoire shows him more. Furious, the grimoire continues to attack, but nothing can get past Lloyd's magical barrier. While the grimoire loses his mind in rage, Lloyd stays calm, analyzing every single attack. He simply can't resist anymore and decides to feel the magic directly on his skin, even if it means risking death again. The grimoire is shocked to see Lloyd letting the magic wrap around his finger. It's incredibly painful, but Lloyd is obsessed with magic and still finds its beauty admirable, even through the pain. He even asks for more, which drives the grimoire into even greater fury. He then decides to cast an even more devastating spell. This time, the grimoire gets serious and uses a special technique. He synchronizes two enchantments at the same time, something normally impossible. But as a demon, he has two mouths and can pull it off. He screams with all his might and unleashes his most powerful attack. But Lloyd remains where he is, just analyzing the magic. The grimoire panics when he realizes that not even his ultimate technique was able to scratch Lloyd's barrier. Meanwhile, Lloyd simply admires the amount of effort it must have taken to become that powerful. The grimoire decides to flee from this insane boy, but is surprised to find that Lloyd has placed another barrier. The grimoire assumes it was made to trap him, but Lloyd reveals that he once made a mistake long ago, and now he's chosen to be far more cautious about everything that lies ahead. The grimoire prepares to attack again, but Lloyd has already finished analyzing his moves. He activates a powerful spell that forces the grimoire to show everything he can do to defend himself. Lloyd launches a massive fire attack, and the grimoire is left speechless, wondering where all that mana is coming from. But by then, it's already too late, as Lloyd's attack completely fries the demon. It's almost ironic, a demon being killed by flames. Lloyd then points out that he didn't block the attack, but grimoire just keeps wondering who this crazy and powerful boy actually is. Grimoire then witnesses as Lloyd restores the entire room after it was completely destroyed. He says he's never encountered a mage so powerful before, which leads him to start calling the boy Master Lloyd. Lloyd is surprised to see that Grimoire actually survived his attack, which only makes this little psychopath even more curious. He wants to see just how much more the Grimoire can withstand. Grimoire has no desire to feel the endless pain that would come from being tested by Lloyd, so he commits himself to the boy and offers to serve as his familiar, and Lloyd accepts. To avoid being discovered, Lloyd asks Grimoire to transform into a smaller animal, and Grimoire picks the cutest form he can manage, but deep down, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's basically counting on that cute appearance to lower Lloyd's guard, so he can catch him off guard later. Lloyd tells the demon to climb into his pocket, and Grimoire can't believe how ridiculous this decision is. It's the perfect opportunity for him. Getting that close to Lloyd means he's sure he'll eventually be able to control his mind and take over his body. Grimoire hides inside Lloyd's cloak, but is instantly overwhelmed by the boy's mana. Grimoire can't understand how it can be so dense and concentrated, and starts to realize he might never be able to control even a single finger of this monster. Grimoire can't believe Lloyd is even human, and starts trembling in fear. Lloyd asks if Grimoire is cold since he's shaking so much, and Grimoire replies that Lloyd can call him Grim. Inside, he tells himself he'll just stay obedient for now. Lloyd happily runs off to go read, and sometime later we see the noble boy preparing for his day, walking through the mansion. In the library, Grim warns Lloyd that someone is approaching. Lloyd tells him to hide, and we soon learn that the noble is named Albert. Albert then performs a magical demonstration and surprises everyone by perfectly hitting the target with his magic. Albert is the second prince of the Kingdom of Salem. He excels in everything, and everyone believes he'll be the one chosen to become the next king. Albert is allowed access to places like this, and he sometimes invites Lloyd to join him. Lloyd isn't able to use much of his magic in the castle, so he enjoys it when Albert invites him to the training field. Lloyd is next to demonstrate his magic, but since he's not interested in the throne, he doesn't feel the need to impress anyone. Besides, if he were to show his true power, he'd be forced to get involved in the battle for the crown among the princes. Lloyd doesn't like that idea. He just wants to research sorcery in peace. Grim wonders what Lloyd will do in this demonstration, and Lloyd explains that he'll simply curve his fireballs so they just barely graze the targets. He says it so casually, but Grim knows it actually takes even more skill than directly hitting the targets. The spectators are disappointed, but Grim thinks they should have realized how impressive it is to control magic with such precision. Lloyd, who loves magic deeply, couldn't care less about their opinions. He's only thinking about how he can improve his technique even more. Albert seems to suspect something but doesn't say anything. He just tells Lloyd that he can stay for now, since he himself will be taking a break. Lloyd couldn't be happier. There are so many things he wants to try. He wants to begin by testing the double chant spell that Grim used, but Grim tells him it's impossible. That's a technique exclusive to demons, who can form extra mouths. However, it looks like Lloyd has already figured out a solution. He's surprised when his idea actually works, and Grim goes absolutely crazy, pointing out that no sane human would try to incorporate a demon into their own body. And well, that's exactly what Lloyd did. So he tells Grim to go ahead and try casting a hellfire ball. Grim says that's child's play for a demon of his caliber, but then panics when things don't go nearly as well as he planned. Grim is left in total despair, wondering what exactly Lloyd did. Lloyd tells him it was just a spell stack, a technique used to compress enchantments. By reciting several spells at once, Lloyd is able to drastically reduce the time it takes to cast a spell. He took it to the extreme, casually saying he was chanting around 100 spells per line of incantation. Grim is shocked to hear the boy say that like it's nothing. Even for powerful demons, they can usually only stack 2 or 3 lines at once. Lloyd performs his next test and discovers that he can now speak with 2 mouths. Grim immediately panics, thinking Lloyd is about to chant 2 advanced spells simultaneously, but Lloyd simply silences him. An immense amount of power begins to flow through him, and Lloyd casts both a hellfire ball and a water lightning spell. Grim's panic reaches its peak when he realizes Lloyd actually did cast 2 incredibly advanced spells at once. The mana is intensifying to absurd levels, and Lloyd couldn't be more excited to see what kind of power dual chanting can bring. Realizing he can't release this power on the ground, Lloyd simply directs the spells into the sky. The result is a massive explosion of power that can be seen from a great distance, even from the castle. Some attendants tell Albert not to waste his time with Lloyd, claiming he's just a child and not particularly skilled in magic. Albert then responds by telling them they're blind. He reveals that Lloyd hit all the targets perfectly, in exactly the same spot and in the same way. He did it on purpose, and because of that, Albert calls Lloyd a genius. Albert predicts that Lloyd could one day become a grand sage and hopes he'll be an ally in the future. The attendants are confident that Albert will be able to convince him, but Albert simply says he just wants to get along with his younger brother. Albert figures Lloyd probably already knocked down all the targets, but once again the servants doubt Lloyd's capabilities. They think it's impossible for a child to take them down that fast, just as one of the servants wonders why it's gotten so dark outside. And we soon see the reason. Grim is trembling in fear after realizing Lloyd opened a hole in the atmosphere. Lloyd panics, as he doesn't want anyone to find out, but fortunately, things return to normal. That was an absolutely insane event, and Grim, still terrified, once again asks himself who the hell Lloyd really is. However, it seems Lloyd has a serious case of ADHD because he's already moved on. Now he's more interested in a new story he read about high-ranking adventurers. They explore a high-difficulty dungeon and return with rare treasures and magical items. That sounds like a lot of fun to Lloyd, so he decides to head to that dungeon himself. Grim warns him that he'll cause mass panic if anyone finds out he left, but Lloyd reveals he already has a solution. Grim is confused when Lloyd brings out an acorn. His confusion turns to shock when Lloyd uses it to create a perfect wooden replica of himself. This replica is actually quite advanced. Lloyd gave it nerves and other internal structures. That way, it doesn't just look like him, it can also perform simple movements on its own. This is some next-level overpowered stuff. But Lloyd says it's still not enough. He admits he would have done this sooner if he had been sure it would work. Unfortunately, it doesn't because the real problem is Silpha. A brief look into the past shows how obsessed she is with Lloyd. She even noticed when he grew 1/4 of a millimeter taller. Lloyd knows this dummy won't be enough to fool her. But of course, he already has a new solution in mind. He steps outside, and we see that he left Grim in control of the replica, while still being able to communicate with him through his hand. The maids all adore how handsome he looks, but Grim just thinks Lloyd is completely insane. He transferred Grim's soul into the replica and integrated his soulless body into his hand. Lloyd leaves everything to Grim now, who starts admiring how realistic the replica is. But soon he realizes Lloyd isn't around to stop him, and a few mischievous ideas start crossing his mind. Just then, Lloyd says that he truly enjoys having Grim as his familiar, and this makes Grim tear up. Lloyd asks if something's wrong, but Grim simply tells him to hurry and go finish the dungeon. Lloyd suddenly realizes he doesn't know where to find a dungeon. That's when Grim points out that someone nearby appears to be under attack, but it turns out that's not the case. The seemingly helpless girl turns on her pursuers and completely destroys them. She displays incredible combat skills, and Grim notes that she must be a martial artist. Lloyd recognizes the breathing technique she's using. It allows the user to channel an energy called kin into their body, granting them extreme physical strength. Somehow, the girl is able to detect their presence, but Lloyd doesn't mind. He just wants to learn more about her technique. However, he begins to panic when Grim says she might recognize him as the Seventh Prince. Lloyd's silence leads the girl to believe he's an enemy, and the two boys start panicking when she begins to approach them. Unfortunately, Lloyd manages to change his appearance just in time and introduces himself as Robert. He used a spell that allows him to transform into someone he has seen before, using his newly learned dual enchantment. He combined his appearance with that of his brother Albert to create a very original look. The girl introduces herself as Tao, and Lloyd worries she might be suspicious since she isn't responding. But in reality, Tao is panicking because she thinks Robert is super hot. Tao spent all 18 years of her life training. She ran away from her dojo and became an adventurer in search of romance. Unfortunately for her, things didn't go as planned since most guys she meets prefer to be fragile spellcasters. But now her chance has finally come, so she vows to make Robert her boyfriend. She seems pretty busy, so Lloyd decides not to invite her to explore the dungeon with him, but she takes the opportunity anyway. Once inside the dungeon, Tao is eager to show off her fighting skills, but our boy Lloyd is too distracted, obsessed with some shiny stones. Tao is impressed by how much Lloyd knows about her breathing technique. She explains that training in Kai begins and ends with breathing. Proper breathing fills the entire body with Kai and allows a person to unleash waves of superhuman strength. The problem is, it takes a lot of training just to begin sensing Kai in your body. That's why Tao tells Robert he should instead dedicate himself to finding the Kai of her heart. Lloyd completely ignores the cheesy joke and shocks Tao by actually managing to use a breathing technique. He says he just copied it, but she warns him that if he's not used to it, it'll feel like his lungs are burning. But Lloyd, being the lunatic that he is, keeps doing it anyway. He's surprised when he actually starts to feel the energy inside him, and gets excited realizing he can apply this power to spellcasting. Tao decides to help him learn about Kai, and instructs him not to stop the breathing technique until they leave the dungeon. Meanwhile, back home, Grim thinks Lloyd is insane. He has such a comfortable life, yet doesn't care about that at all. All that matters to him is learning more about sorcery, and things are actually going well for Grim, until Silpha appears, and Grim gets terrified again. Back in the dungeon, Tao demonstrates a burst of Kai and uses it to defeat a dungeon boss. They are rewarded with a treasure chest, but Tao explains that a dungeon that hasn't developed much won't have any impressive loot. When they look at the chest, Tao is a bit surprised that Robert has already learned her breathing technique in such a short time. Tao realizes she hit the jackpot. If she can get Robert to start a student-teacher romance, her caretaker will have no choice but to accept him as her fiancé. Tao goes to open the chest, but Lloyd will have to rescue her because it turns out to be a deadly trap. A trash monster emerges from the chest, and Lloyd wonders if this is actually the dungeon's true boss. Tao pretends like this trash isn't a big deal, and tells Robert to leave the dungeon while she handles it. But he wants to see her fight. In truth, the situation is much worse than she's letting on, so she apologizes to Robert and forces him out of the dungeon. She figures maybe she broke a few of his bones, but that's better than him dying to the trash monster. Tao dodges the monster's attacks. But consider that even a rank adventurers aren't a match for this thing. She's not arrogant enough to think she can beat it, so she focuses on buying enough time for Robert to escape. Elsewhere, Lloyd is still flying through the air after being launched by Tao. He's disappointed because there was still so much he wanted to learn. He stops midair and wonders if he should go back. He's unsure, since he doesn't understand why Tao threw him out of the dungeon. So he asks Grim for advice. Grim doesn't respond at first, but when he finally does, he tells Lloyd to return home quickly to save him. Back at the fight, things are not going well for Tao. She realizes her life is slipping away. She tries to retreat, but is shocked when the trash monster starts speaking. It explains that it consumes adventurers' souls to gain their knowledge and skills. It then determines that Tao isn't worth eating, since her Kai technique is just low-level magic. However, it's very interested in Lloyd, because of how fast he reacted to the trap. Tao then insists that the trash monster and Robert are nothing alike. Most people treat Kai techniques like a waste of time, but Robert said he was impressed by them. The trash monster doesn't care, so Tao attacks it. A barrier protects the monster, but she continues attacking it without rest, as she explains that she's been training to use her Kai techniques since she was 5 years old. Tao truly shows how irritated she is, saying she spent all that time training and never had the chance to find a boyfriend. After throwing out countless strikes, she finishes with one final devastating blow, declaring that all her frustration is exactly why no one should mess with her. Tao used up so much of her Kai that she can't move a single inch anymore. Things are starting to look bad. The trash monster reveals it's still alive. Tao had unleashed a full-powered Kai explosion to destroy its barrier, but the trash mocks her attempt, saying it was pathetic. Her full power is weaker than the magic of a single one of its fingers. It goes on insulting her, claiming she wasted her entire life on useless training. Then, it casts a spell to crush her with a magic fragment, but it's shocked to see Lloyd suddenly appear to rescue her. Lloyd says he's taking over now, but he doesn't have much time, so he'll have to end the fight quickly. Tao has no idea what's going on and asks Robert what he's doing there, but she sees he's dead serious. Lloyd instantly flies behind the trash monster, and Tao is stunned to see him using a breathing technique. The trash is surprised too, but not because of the breathing. Lloyd just cast an aerial class spell called Full Screens, which should be impossible to cast without an incantation. The trash attacks, but is shocked at the strength of Lloyd's barrier. Lloyd doesn't seem interested in the fight itself. He's focused on perfecting the combination of Kai and mana, which he still hasn't mastered. But he remembers Tao's advice: focus. Lloyd inhales even more air into his lungs as he concentrates and speeds up his total run spell. The trash thinks Lloyd is trying to flee and launches another attack, but Lloyd is just breathing in more air. His own barrier is getting in the way, so he deliberately deactivates it. But the trash thinks he destroyed it and now has the upper hand. It doesn't go in for the finishing blow, though. Lloyd dodges every attack. Tao is shocked to realize that the trash's strike didn't break the barrier. Robert took it down himself to breathe deeper and use an even stronger Kai technique. He continues dodging while his Kai begins to radiate around him. Everyone watching is stunned as Lloyd uses his new power, but he's still not satisfied. He makes a small adjustment and starts laughing like a maniac as he unleashes a flurry of attacks against the trash. The psycho even hopes the monster doesn't give up. He's having way too much fun and still wants to test many more things. The trash, for its part, is utterly confused. It was sure Lloyd was just a mage, and yet, even without using a single incantation, his basic Kai techniques are going toe-to-toe with the trash's advanced sorcery. The trash starts taking damage, and realizes Lloyd's techniques are actually overwhelming it. Lloyd refines his attacks even more. The trash prepares to block with its barrier, but it's no use. The attack pierces through the barrier and through the trash's body. Meanwhile, Tao watches in complete shock as Lloyd declares that he's finally discovered something. Afterward, Tao is a little disappointed. All they got in exchange for so much effort was an old dagger. Lloyd takes a closer look and realizes the dagger is infused with mana. But even so, Tao still thinks it's not worth much and decides to leave it with him. At that moment, Lloyd is startled as the dungeon starts to collapse. Tao explains its normal dungeons collapse after the boss is defeated. Lloyd is surprised and compares it to the survival tactic of lizards that shed their tails. He realizes that dungeons lie dormant underground until a magical item is left behind. The dungeon absorbs that item and gradually builds a new structure around it. He also notes that dungeons collect the items from adventurers who didn't survive, and when it senses it's about to be destroyed, it offers one of those items as a sort of bribe to guarantee its survival. Lloyd finds all of this incredibly fascinating, but time is running out. He quickly manages to pull a chest from the ground and, together with Tao, escapes just moments before the dungeon collapses completely. Lloyd is amazed to see the dungeon finally sealed off. It will now gather strength underground until it can become active again. Tao acknowledges that Robert is an incredible mage, but she still doesn't understand why he chose to use a Kai technique at the end of the battle. Curious, Tao asks if he did it to help her, since the trash was mocking her. And to her disappointment and ours, Lloyd reveals that he only used the technique because he just wanted to have some fun. But at that moment, Lloyd gets ready to leave, remembering that he has to go back home. Meanwhile, Tao is deep in thought, realizing that the Kai technique Lloyd used was so advanced, she couldn't even reproduce it herself. Determined, she declares she's going to train even harder to become even stronger. The last time they see each other, Lloyd, as he's leaving, says he's also going to train a lot. So Tao decides she wants to become someone capable of catching Lloyd's attention. But at that moment, she realizes she has no way of contacting him anymore. And it's already too late. Lloyd is long gone and has already made it back home. There, he's shocked to see Grim crying. Silpha had taken the fake Lloyd out for training, but she was terrified by how weak he was and promised to make him strong again. Now Grim is crying because he didn't get to go through that training himself. He's also disappointed to find out Lloyd was away all this time, only to come back with a sword of questionable quality. But Lloyd says the sword is actually a valuable treasure. He puts it in hot water and scrapes its surface to reveal it was treated with mana essence. He explains that mana essence is extremely difficult to obtain, and that enchantment spells are also very complex. Mana essence is used to inscribe magical formulas onto weapons, making them stronger. However, if the enchantment fails, both the essence and the weapon are completely destroyed. Since mana essence is so rare, Lloyd decides to analyze the one he has, hoping to recreate it. He casts a purification spell and discovers the components: oil, silver, and a substance called ametide. Ametide is a powder extracted from the core of monsters, making it an extremely rare material. Luckily, they can retrieve some ametide from the dungeon chest, so now they only need the oil and silver. Lloyd's father gives him a few silver coins, wondering what he's planning to buy with them. Soon after, Lloyd and Grim head to their hideout, where they melt down the silver. Then, Lloyd proposes a bet to Silpha. If he manages to hit her, she has to give him some oil. He tries to trick her with a little bit of magic and gets ready to win the bet. But at the last moment, he loses track of her. Silpha appears behind him and wins. Even so, she kindly gives him the oil, saying she's happy he's not as weak as before. Grim was secretly watching everything and feels deeply insulted. He realizes she was calling him weak. He thinks that even without magic, she shouldn't have been able to beat him. So he asks, "Just what kind of maid are you?" Anyway, Silpha watches Lloyd and admires how impressive he is. Even though he's only 10 years old, he's amazing both with the sword and magic. She imagines that he could one day become a great knight commander. Lloyd just thanks her for the oil, and she wonders what he's planning to cook with that. Back at the hideout, Lloyd and Grim add the oil to the mixture, and finally complete the mana essence. Lloyd then asks Albert for some weapons to test his enhancement magic. Albert finds Lloyd's love of magic adorable, and asks his troops which of them wants their adorable little brother to enchant their weapon. They all eagerly offer their swords, but only because Albert practically ordered them to. In truth, they're not excited at all. Enchantments are so difficult that they almost never work. And worse, Lloyd is only 10 years old. They're convinced he's going to end up breaking all the weapons. Grim overhears how much they're doubting Lloyd and gets furious. He decides to help and angrily declares that they'll enchant those weapons and make them invincible. Lloyd writes out an enchantment called Boost Power. He starts acting like a mad scientist. Grim is shocked when Lloyd applies 3 layers of the spell. This kid is a maniac, filling every tiny spot he can find with spell formulas. Naturally, the sword breaks. The steel can't handle that many enchantments. Lloyd realizes that enchanting is hard, but Grim encourages him to keep going. After many failures, he finally gets the hang of it. Then he returns to Albert with 50 of the 120 swords he was given. He apologizes for breaking 70 of them, though in truth, he managed to enchant 80. The problem is, he tried adding even more spells to some of them and ended up destroying them. Albert is stunned. Even top-level enchanters only have about a 10% success rate. The soldiers don't believe Lloyd actually enchanted the swords. They think he just gave up after ruining 70 and is returning the rest untouched. So, they pretend and say the swords look sharper, but one of them is surprised when his sheath is sliced clean in half. They don't even know how to react. But Grim, small and annoyed, feels vindicated. Albert is impressed with how powerful the swords are, and Lloyd explains that he was waiting to see them in actual battle. The timing is perfect, as Albert reveals they're going on a monster hunt. Not long after, Lloyd joins Albert and brings Grim along. They arrive at the forest where the hunt is supposed to happen. But the monster isn't in the forest, it's by a nearby lake. Lloyd is absolutely thrilled. He doesn't get to leave the castle very often, and now he gets to see his enchanted swords in action. Albert mentions that Silpha never leaves Lloyd's side, and she thanks him for letting her come along. Albert then teases that her feelings for Lloyd might be a bit too strong, but she shuts him up with a threat. At that moment, they're surrounded by a pack of kobolds. The soldiers treat this like a warm-up before facing the real monster. Lloyd pretends to be scared, but Grim knows he sensed the threat long before. One of the key techniques Talon taught him was spectral detection. Using Kai breathing, Lloyd can constantly sense the environment around him. Grim realizes that Lloyd always has this detection active, along with a barrier. Surprising him is literally impossible. Grim concludes that Lloyd gets scarier by the day. The fight begins, and everyone is shocked at how sharp the swords are. They're not just cutting monsters, they're slicing through steel armor like it's butter. The soldiers react like kids holding knives for the first time. Lloyd decides that his enchantments were a success, and Albert agrees, calling his brother a prodigy of enchantment. Silpha agrees as well, standing atop a pile of defeated monsters. But Lloyd points out that he didn't even enchant her sword. Right then, a kobold tries to attack Lloyd, but Tal appears out of nowhere and takes it down. Lloyd almost calls her by the wrong name Roberto, but catches himself in time. Tal notices Lloyd is using Kai breathing techniques, but says she came because she thought she sensed Roberto. Looking more closely, she notices a strong resemblance between Lloyd and Roberto. Silpha kills another monster and compliments Tal for the assist, but warns her not to get too close to Prince Lloyd. Tal says she felt the presence of a stronger monster approaching, and warns them not to underestimate advanced Kai techniques. Tension rises between the two. Albert steps in and calms them down, inviting Tal to join him instead. That night, Tal is shocked to learn that Albert is a prince. He does resemble Roberto a little, but not as much as Lloyd does. Lloyd hides nearby and realizes Tal's proficiency with Kai has made her extremely sensitive to his presence. He was using spectral detection, and that must be how she found him. He decides to hide inside his tent, but for some reason, Silpha is in there changing clothes. Lloyd tells her he doesn't need her to protect him, but Silpha disagrees. She doesn't like that this new girl is chasing after him. Tal walks in and interrupts. Silpha calls her an idiot. Tal calls Silpha a pervy maid. The two start bickering, and Lloyd takes the opportunity to sneak out. Albert calls Lloyd a lady killer, and notes that Silpha has changed a lot since she started looking after him. Silpha sees a lot of maturity in Lloyd, but Albert warns him that relationships with women can be complicated. At that moment, the girls realize the soldiers are watching them a bit too closely, so they knock them all out. Lloyd gets the message from Albert loud and clear. Tall explains she was hired to cleanse an ancient shrine. Silpha tells her to hurry up and do it. They almost start arguing again, but Albert steps in and says Tall's ability to sense danger is very useful. He wants her to stand watch during the night, but Tall says there's no need, because the monster is already here. It's a wolf-bear monster. Silpha tells Lloyd to stay behind her. The monster charges in, and Lloyd notes how incredibly fast wolf bears are for their size. He tries to talk to Grim, but the little guy is lying on the ground, as if he recognizes the shrine. Tall manages to save a few soldiers, but this monster is seriously strong. Albert's had enough. He draws his sword, apologizes to the beast, and says that the locals have suffered long enough. He unleashes a devastating attack, reciting a spell while swinging his blade, and obliterates the monster in one blow. Everyone is shocked. He took the monster down with a single strike. But Albert realizes his attack is never that strong, and that it was only possible because of the enchantment Lloyd put on his sword. Lloyd thinks about how he added a little extra to Albert's sword, but Grim isn't even paying attention. He's deeply worried. He reveals that there's a sealed demon in the nearby shrine. Everyone is shocked when the wolf bear is suddenly still able to move. Other monsters appear out of nowhere, and a voice begins to speak. It's angry that one of its servants was harmed. The voice comes from inside the wolf bear and introduces itself as the demon Pazuzu. He swears they'll pay with their lives and sends his minions to attack. They're easy to cut down, but the problem is that they regenerate instantly. Tall rescues Albert and quickly determines that the demon is controlling all the minions. Lloyd wonders if this demon is someone Grim knows, but he doesn't. Grim explains that Pazuzu can transmute his mana to control monsters. This makes the monsters believe he's their master, but in reality, his mana just acts like strings, controlling them like puppets. He can also channel mana through those strings, which is why the monsters regenerate so fast. Grim declares seriously that things are about to get ugly, and Pazuzu won't be easy to defeat. Lloyd, however, doesn't care. He just wants Grim to teach him mana transmutation. Silpha wants Tall to do something already, but Tall points out that Silpha isn't doing anything either. Grim warns Lloyd that this isn't the best time to try learning something. People are literally fighting for their lives. But Lloyd is confident they'll be fine, and insists that Grim teach him anyway. Meanwhile, Pazuzu watches the battle. He comments that although his opponents have skill, most of them are only surviving because of their weapons. He starts mocking Lloyd, saying he ran away like a scared baby. Silpha clearly doesn't like what he's saying, so Pazuzu provokes her further, saying it must be exhausting for her to care for such a pathetic waste of flesh like Lloyd. This really crosses the line. Silpha snaps, and Tall is terrified by the change in her. Silpha apologizes softly to Lloyd, but he doesn't even mind. He's still focused on learning. Pazuzu keeps throwing insults, but Silpha starts to retaliate, saying all his minions stink, and the only thing worse is his breath. She declares that he's ruining the fresh air around Lloyd, and for that, she'll take him down. Silpha casually draws her sword, but Pazuzu says they have no chance of surviving. As long as he's providing mana, his monsters will keep regenerating endlessly. Demons don't run out of mana, and neither will he. Pazuzu expects Silpha to cry, but she just says his breath is unbearable. Obvious starts getting worried as the demon attacks Silpha, but she's more than fine. She manages to cut off all of the demon's legs. She tells Pazuzu to abandon the wolf bear body he's controlling, warning that if he doesn't, his defeat will come even faster. At that moment, everyone notices that the minions have stopped moving, and they're healing much more slowly. That's because Pazuzu is focusing all his mana on regenerating his own body inside the wolf bear. That gives them a window of opportunity, so Albert tells Silpha to keep attacking. She prepares to do so, but Pazuzu thinks they're all just a bunch of fools. Meanwhile, Grim finishes explaining to Lloyd. He comments that Pazuzu must have incredible talent with mana transmutation, since it's not easy, even for a powerful demon. Grim tries to demonstrate mana control, explaining that a good first step is adding color to the mana, then comes shaping it, and even adding sense. Grim does his best, but is stunned when Lloyd reveals he already shaped his mana into a flower, and even added a fragrance to it. Grim can't believe Lloyd did it so perfectly, and the two take a moment to appreciate the scent. Meanwhile, Pazuzu is extremely frustrated. Silpha is beating the crap out of him. He can't understand how she leaves no opening, how someone like her could just be a nanny. Silpha borrows a sword from one of the soldiers, and admires it enchanted by Lloyd. Her obsession with Lloyd makes Pazuzu curious. He declares that he wants to dissect him. The demon shows off immense speed, but keeps insulting Lloyd, which only makes Silpha even angrier. The demon grabs and mocks her, calling her a stupid human for falling into his trap. However, he freezes completely when he realizes Silpha is still alive, and in one clean strike, she cuts the wolf bear's body in half, declaring that this is her family's twin blade art. Then she follows up with another move called Diving Sparrow, which cleanly severs the monster's head. Pazuzu tries to insult her, saying she's just a maid. But unfortunately for him, that's not true. Silpha uses yet another sword technique to completely obliterate the wolf and expose the demon within. Everyone is absolutely shocked by her power, and Lloyd realizes this is what Silpha looks like when she's serious. He admires and memorizes the moment, molding his mana after her. Silpha is disgusted at the idea of the demon trying to hurt Lloyd, and declares that the only thing he'll ever touch is her blade. She tells the demon to make peace, but is shocked when he actually starts doing something. The others finish off the remaining minions. But Albert knows it's not over yet. Then, everyone suddenly collapses, overwhelmed by the demon's miasma, including Silpha herself. Pazuzu is furious, having spent over a century building these puppets. He blames Silpha for ruining everything, and sends her flying into a river with his attack. Albert wants to help her, but he's running out of strength. Pazuzu reveals that this is the miasma of domination, and everyone who inhales it falls under his control. Silpha remarks that that's why it smells so bad. Pazuzu, irritated, doesn't stop with the insults. His next attack is aimed at Silpha, but it's blocked by Tao. Silpha tries to say she's okay, but it's clearly not true. She tries to act brave and tells Tao to run, but she's badly hurt and ends up passing out. Pazuzu is actually impressed with her, saying she took in more miasma than anyone else, and still managed to fiercely challenge him. Even the monsters he controlled fell to her in less than 30 seconds. But what intrigues him more is Tao. She isn't under his control. Tao pushes him back, but he ends up capturing her. Pazuzu guesses she might be using some sort of breathing technique to resist his miasma, and he's exactly right. But things get worse for Tao when her breathing is disrupted. He notes that she could have just run away, but the creepy demon assumes she stayed because she wanted to be his slave. Tao shoves him again and tells him she's actually waiting for a handsome guy. She's not joking this time. She unleashes an incredibly powerful attack. Realizing she's getting a bit too fired up, she goes for a huge move. Tao tries to stabilize her breathing before the demon can counterattack. But then something even worse happens. She's attacked by one of his puppets. She's shocked to see that they've already regenerated. Pazuzu wonders who this handsome guy she mentioned is. Tired of all the talk, he releases his miasma of domination at full power. He's sure she'll fall under his control now. But Tao suddenly realizes something. The handsome guy she's been waiting for is closer than she thought. She can still feel him, even through all of Pazuzu's miasma, and that gives her hope. Pazuzu has no idea what she's talking about. Tao then reveals that the most handsome guy of all is on his way to destroy him. Unfortunately, her time runs out, and she is devoured by one of the puppet monsters. Pazuzu now turns his attention to Silpha, thinking she'd make a perfect addition to his army. He knows it'll be tough to bring her under control, but her power is worth the cost. Pazuzu plans to flood her with miasma, and Lloyd realizes that this must be how he controlled the werewolves, using miasma to kill their parents and break the minds of the pups. Pazuzu proudly declares that no one can challenge his rule. Lloyd calmly says he's awful. Pazuzu is shocked to see that Lloyd is somehow able to move freely within the miasma. He demands to know how that's possible, but Lloyd doesn't even know himself. That fact alone is even more terrifying. Then Pazuzu is stunned again when he realizes Grim is a demon. He can't understand why a demon would be protecting a human, and even insults Grim for being so handsome. Pazuzu calls him a disgrace to demonkind. Grim tries to give him advice as a fellow demon, but holds back, saying the constant insults only make him want to watch Pazuzu get torn to pieces. Pazuzu then sends his terrifying demons to attack, but Lloyd is just excited to test out his newly learned skill, mana transmutation. However, with so many monsters, Grim tells Lloyd he'll need to use a large amount of mana. Little does Grim know, this kid has practically infinite mana. Lloyd calculates exactly the right amount to use, and Grim is surprised. He's never been able to control his own mana output that precisely. Lloyd envisions something gentle and warm, which leaves Pazuzu stunned. When Lloyd effortlessly removes his influence over the werewolves, Grim then calls all of them cowards, Lloyd points out that even Grimm might have fallen under the influence of his own mana. Lloyd then makes one of the werewolves spit Tao out, and he is relieved to see that she is safe. Pazuzu is still in disbelief at how Lloyd was able to instantly convert all his mana into a field of blooming flowers. He assumes Lloyd must be some sort of extraordinary sorcerer. Pazuzu tries to regain control over his minions once again, but Grimm declares that it is already too late. The werewolves have remembered their power as monsters, and that Pazuzu was the one who wiped out their parents. Enraged werewolves begin to attack Pazuzu, and Lloyd is impressed by how they coordinate and fight as a group. They are incredibly powerful like this, and no puppet could ever replicate such behavior. Pazuzu then reveals that he is still a formidable demon and punishes the werewolves who dared attack him. He feels no remorse for having eradicated their parents and insults them, calling them mangy mutts. Pazuzu is now extremely furious and says this is what happens when someone dares to challenge him. He explains that no matter what kind of spells Lloyd tries to use, they will be ineffective against a demon. Lloyd recalls that Grimm said the same thing earlier, that demons cannot be eliminated by magic. Grimm confirms that nothing like this has ever happened before. Pazuzu then proclaims he will now show Lloyd his true power, since he is no longer supplying mana to his minions. But Lloyd doesn't even listen, as he is now completely absorbed in trying to understand why magic cannot eliminate demons. He assumes that demons are incredibly hard to completely erase, but that only excites this peculiar boy even more, making him eager to discover what is truly needed to accomplish such a feat. Pazuzu is then absolutely horrified by the dark and immense power of mana coming from Lloyd's body, and Grimm points out that this is the reason why Pazuzu's mana never had any effect on Lloyd. Lloyd had once decided to keep his power hidden in order to avoid causing unnecessary tension, and containing it all this time has been a truly exhausting effort. Grimm tells Pazuzu that his mana was never even close to being enough to reach Lloyd. Pazuzu and Grimm may both be demons, but there is nothing they can do with their mana that compares to Lloyd's power. This boy is a bit of a madman as always, and is thrilled to have a demon available to test out all the spells he wants to experiment with, especially since, supposedly, demons cannot be destroyed by magic. That means Lloyd can unleash his power without any kind of restraint. Pazuzu trembles in fear, only able to imagine how Lloyd could possess such an outrageous amount of mana. He wonders if this is some kind of nightmare and is left in shock. Lloyd then tries to place a barrier around him, and things get truly terrifying for Pazuzu when he realizes that, to Lloyd, this is not a battle. Lloyd sees him only as a test subject trying to trap him in a cage. Pazuzu tries to flee, and Grimm doesn't blame him. He admits he would do the same. Lloyd, on the other hand, is having the time of his life, now that he can finally release some of his power. But Pazuzu is desperately running for his life, trying to avoid being trapped inside the barriers that Lloyd keeps setting. Pazuzu is attempting to escape and starts begging Lloyd to stop, while Grimm watches in astonishment, wondering how many spells Lloyd can cast at once. Lloyd explains that he can cast around 20, but then he joins forces with Grimm to cast even more. Life becomes much harder for Pazuzu, as now he must dodge an even greater number of magical barriers. He asks how Lloyd is still casting spells so quickly. Pazuzu compliments himself, thinking he's doing well at dodging Lloyd's barriers. But that doesn't last long, as Lloyd suddenly uses a spatial spell called Dimensional Includer. Lloyd tells him that he now belongs to him. Pazuzu pleads with the psychotic sorcerer to let him go, but Lloyd refuses and reminds him that Pazuzu did terrible things to the werewolves. He not only eliminated their parents, but also experimented with chimeras on them. Pazuzu demands to be released immediately, claiming to be the demon destined to rule the entire world. When that fails, Pazuzu tries to offer Lloyd a higher position in his future regime, but that doesn't work either. He then pleads for Lloyd to calm down, admitting that he has never been struck by the magic of someone as powerful as him, and now genuinely fears that he could die. But Lloyd is no longer paying attention to him, and is already chanting an absolutely insane enchantment. Pazuzu continues begging for his life, but it is already too late, because the spell is in motion. Lloyd estimates that he's casting around 240 spells per minute. He is amazed by the beauty of the scene, and decides to continue doing this for another 30 minutes. But not even 5 minutes later, he begins to fear that the demon may already be dead. Grimm explains that sorcery affects demons the same way unpleasant sounds and lights affect humans. However, the massive amount of magic Lloyd used on the demon caused serious consequences. Now Pazuzu is falling apart, and he thinks about how he spent an entire century creating those monsters. He was supposed to dominate the world, but all of that was suddenly interrupted by a boy who just wanted to run some experiments on him. Lloyd is already quite disinterested, which only adds to Pazuzu's sense of humiliation. At that moment, Lloyd is shocked to see that everyone is already waking up. He can't let anyone find out about his incredible power, so he runs off to come up with an excuse. Grimm tells Pazuzu that he has realized people do not want leaders who complain about the hardships they face. It's far more likely that they'll follow someone who's simply having fun, and Lloyd is always doing what he enjoys when he wants to do it, and that is probably why people are constantly joining him. Grimm then remembers to maintain his tough guy persona and explains that he is not like those others who follow Lloyd. He is only gathering power so that one day he can take revenge. Upon hearing this, Pazuzu decides to entrust Grimm with his ambition of ruling the world. Grimm accepts and is pleased to see that Pazuzu's mana restored some of his own. Lloyd came up with an excuse and told everyone that someone named Roberto appeared to defeat the demon and save them all. Tao hears this and wonders where he is now. Everyone in the city celebrates the victorious return of Prince Albert. They all think Lloyd is a handsome boy, but he still can't compare to the great Albert, which makes Silpha quite upset. The king is satisfied with Albert and asks where the two adventurers who helped him are. Albert explains that Roberto was never seen, but we can take a look at the past to find out what happened to Tao. She becomes suspicious when she realizes she's wearing Lloyd's poncho. He tricked her and sent her away, telling her that Roberto was nearby. The king becomes very interested in this Roberto figure, but Albert reveals in a shocking way that Lloyd was actually the one who contributed the most to the hunt. They were only able to survive thanks to Lloyd's weapons, so he believes Lloyd should be considered as part of the royal succession. Everyone in the room is stunned by this, as Albert believes Lloyd would be an excellent candidate for the throne. The king notes that this would only create another rival for Albert, but Albert thinks the throne should go to whoever is most worthy, even if it's not him. He questions any decision that would exclude Lloyd merely because of his youth. However, Albert moves on. The king is excited to see how this shift in events will unfold, and he asks Lloyd whether he'll join the fight and if he will stand beside his brothers in the race for the throne. Everyone is thrilled by this major moment, but Lloyd calmly refuses. Outside, we see someone running like a silly little child. He explains that he's one of the werewolves who followed them back home. Lloyd finds him very cute and adorable, which makes Grimm jealous. Because the werewolves don't have that same reaction to him, Grimm gets flustered and casually interrupts the conversation. Then Silpha shows up to see how much the werewolf likes Lloyd, and he hides Grimm in his fur. Lloyd decided to name the wolf Shiro, and he's excited to teach him many things. Silpha comments that complex commands are usually the domain of monster tamers, so Lloyd thinks about using his mana to control monsters the same way they do. The king is surprised by how casually Lloyd refused the opportunity to compete for the throne. Lloyd is always entirely focused on magic, being a true fanatic about it. The king observes this and believes Lloyd declined the offer out of modesty, but Albert disagrees. He thinks royalty is a role far too small for Lloyd. The king agrees and is excited to see what the future holds for Lloyd. Later, we discover that Lloyd taught Shiro some simple commands, which he learned easily, but complex commands are more difficult. Lloyd tried writing a command in his mana, but that ended up confusing the poor animal. They decide to seek out a monster expert and go to the tower in Princess Ali's garden. The king is impressed by all the monsters present there, and Lloyd explains that Ali's is his sister and the 6th princess of Salem. She is an animal lover, not just of dogs and cats, but of all creatures, including monsters. At that moment, she appears and shows immense affection for Lloyd, so much that he faints. Ali's is scolded by her maid, Ares, but she explains that she simply can't contain herself. Lloyd is impressed when Ali's correctly identifies Shiro as a bear wolf, but she seems a bit insane, and Silpha starts to doubt that she can actually help them. Lloyd wants to give her a chance and asks her to take a look at one of his monsters. He is shocked when she reveals that there was already a lower-class Fenrir named Lyro. Grimm is surprised, as it's actually a high-level bear wolf. Lloyd can't believe that this monster went undetected by his presence detection. But the most most surprising part is that he has no idea when Ali's even issued the command. The Fenrir knew how to sneak behind them and even stole Silpha's headband. Clearly, Ali's gave several complex commands without showing any sign of doing so. That gets Lloyd very excited, and he asks Ali's to teach him how to speak with Shiro. Ali's explains that it won't be easy, but Lloyd says he prefers things that are not simple, so she agrees to teach him, but surprises everyone when she reveals that the key to speaking with animals is love. She declares that love will help you understand any monster, and this is demonstrated when all the animals in her tower come to embrace her. Ares thinks it's useless to try learning from Ali's, since she's simply a prodigy, but Ali's insists that Shiro can learn. She gives another demonstration, but this time the animals get a bit overexcited with everyone. Silpha is shocked to see that Lloyd seems to be showing interest in love. She imagines Lloyd asking her to teach him more about it. In reality, Lloyd realizes he had been trying to give commands to Shiro, but his sister had never issued any orders to her animals. Instead, she was simply sharing her will with them. When she spoke to them, Lloyd noticed that the mana wasn't coming from her hands, but was flowing directly from her head to theirs. This means she is subconsciously connecting to the animals through mana, giving them a direct vision of what she desires. Lloyd concludes that instead of giving commands, he'll try to share a mental image of his will. So he does exactly that, and everyone is amazed when Shiro performs the trick Lloyd had been trying to teach. He celebrates alongside Shiro, and Ares concludes that he truly must be very talented. The technique he used is exactly how monster tamers share their will. Silpha is also impressed, though slightly disappointed, that it wasn't the way she had imagined. Ares is upset, saying it should have been love. But sharing one's will isn't something that complicated. Lloyd explains that love indeed plays a fundamental role in the technique, and he is absolutely thrilled to have finally discovered how to connect with animals. Silpha suggests that he should dedicate himself to sword training as well. And coincidentally, Albert appears, wanting to talk with Lloyd. They argue over who gets to keep Lloyd's attention, and Albert mentions that he wants to introduce him to someone. That someone is Lloyd's older brother, the fourth prince, Dion. Dion heard that Lloyd enchanted Albert's sword, but he's skeptical and wants to see it with his own eyes. Albert explains that Dion studied blacksmithing in Stereo, which is why he's quite interested in enchantment. Without wasting time, Dion prepares a test for Lloyd's abilities. And when he begins the process, Dion doubts that Lloyd can pull it off. Enchantments are already complicated, and what Lloyd supposedly did to Albert's sword seems impossible, far beyond what they understand. So Dion considers teaching Lloyd a lesson for supposedly lying. But his jaw drops when Lloyd finishes the enchantment. Albert understands Dion's reaction, since even a beginner can tell that Lloyd's technique is completely unique. Dion is left speechless, wondering what kind of magical engraving Lloyd just created. The sword now has reinforced durability, increased flexibility, self-cleaning, and even self-repair. Dion's skepticism turns to excitement as he realizes that Lloyd might be the key to achieving his greatest dream, creating the best enchanted sword in the world. He wants to engrave the spell into the weapon during the steel forging process, allowing for the use of more advanced spells than usual. This would result in a super weapon that could only be made through the collaboration of an enchanter and a blacksmith. Dion reveals that he always loved sorcery as a child, but never had the talent for it. However, enchanted swords are amazing, because anyone can use them. His goal is to turn the country into a place where everyone can wield magic through swords. Lloyd, on the other hand, doesn't care much about those goals. He's more interested in the production process, so he agrees to help Dion. Dion explains that he wants the sword to release fire when swung, and for that, Lloyd recommends an enchantment called Pyro Lens. The problem is that the formula requires 14 components, and an enchanted sword can only hold a maximum of 5. Lloyd's solution is to compress the formula into just 2 components. Lloyd completes the compression and prepares to apply it to the steel that Dion is currently forging. However, both are surprised to see that the steel broke just from the application. Lloyd tries to find solutions, but the steel keeps breaking. He feels bad for wasting so much mana essence without understanding what is going wrong. At that moment, Grimm notices something about the mana essence and Lloyd's pressure. Dion encourages Lloyd to keep trying, saying he managed to obtain a large amount of mana essence at a low price. Lloyd then purifies the mana essence and realizes it contains almost no ametite. Enchanting the sword requires a much higher concentration of ametite, but this material is made from monster cores and is quite rare. Dion has none, so Lloyd considers sneaking out to hunt some monsters in a dungeon again. At that moment, Silpha suggests taking them to a dungeon. Lloyd points out that, as a prince, he does not have permission to go hunting. But Silpha explains that the king changed his mind after the recent monster hunt incident. Now he believes Lloyd must broaden his horizons and learn more about the world. To begin this journey, they go to the Adventurers Guild so Lloyd can register as one. The receptionist, Katarina, asks Lloyd to fill out some paperwork before touching a crystal orb that will measure his strength and determine his adventurer rank. Lloyd is already familiar with these crystal orbs, having used one when he led the Magic Academy in his previous life. However, these are different circumstances. Lloyd is certain the crystal orb would explode if he used his full power, which would attract a lot of attention. To prevent that, Lloyd focuses on suppressing his mana even more than usual, shrinking it to the size of a flea. When he finally touches the crystal orb, he is mocked for receiving a General E rank. However, Katarina is not laughing. On the contrary, she is shocked to see that Lloyd's magic ranking is comparable to that of an experienced sorcerer. Lloyd feels disappointed because he thought he had only used 1% of his mana. Katarina then declares that Lloyd is the most promising new adventurer since the one known as Silverblade. The other adventurers become furious upon hearing her make such comparison. The legendary Silverblade had crossed countless dungeons like a true demon, but then disappeared suddenly. They believe a legend like her should never be mentioned in the same context as a mere beginner adventurer. Since there are no A-rank adventurers available, Silpha explains they want a dungeon mission. However, those require at least one B-rank adventurer to participate. Silpha then decides to register again, but one of the adventurers insists she should go with him. After Silpha puts him in his place, Katarina reveals that he just messed with the wrong person. Silpha is actually the legendary adventurer Silverblade. Katarina explains that re-registering involves a 2-rank demotion, which would place her at C rank, so it would not work. At that moment, Tao appears and offers to help. However, Silpha barely recognizes her and says they are already heading home. Tao insists and explains that she has been traveling from dungeon to dungeon in search of Robert. This journey has made her strong enough to be classified as a rank. Now, Tao offers her help in exchange for a date with Albert. Katarina recommends a dungeon mission, while Silpha retrieves Lloyd's cloak. Lloyd is surprised to learn about her legendary past. She explains that it all happened when she was very young. What she remembers most is her failed attempt to defeat a deadly group of enemies. The trio continues on their path and soon finds a treasure chest. Meanwhile, back at the forge, Albert speaks with Diane. Diane explains that Lloyd will need a few more days to bring the precision materials. However, Albert seems somewhat concerned about the time it is taking, which makes Diane realize that a war is nearing its end. Even so, he asks Albert to wait a little longer. Once Lloyd returns, they will be able to mass-produce those enchanted swords for battlefield use. Albert says they should not be concerned with fighting for now, as his true goal in gathering them all is to help them get along again as brothers. He hopes that one day their weapons will help protect the kingdom, and he encourages Diane to keep trying. At that moment, Diane says they should hurry, because Lloyd has already returned with the monster core. While working on the sword, Diane realizes that Lloyd is an incredible boy. Albert, however, already knew that and believes there is nothing Lloyd cannot do. This idea is reinforced even more when Diane tests the enchanted sword. They created a blade capable of massive destruction. Lloyd realizes he may have gone a bit overboard in forging the sword, and decides he'll need to modify it in the future. Thus, the sword forged by the brothers is born, and it is given the name the Lord. That night, Lloyd takes a rest. He notices Albert has been extremely busy lately and wonders if something major is about to happen. At that moment, he feels something strange coming from the garden. A very unusual sensation, almost like a tear in space. His perception is incredibly sharp, yet even he can't quite figure it out. Lloyd begins to wonder what it could be, and we see a mysterious figure outside. The girl outside is visibly shocked when Lloyd suddenly appears before her. He remains incredibly calm, while she tries to flee only to discover she's trapped. Lloyd tells her he only wants to talk, despite the fact that she's an intruder. The girl then uses a strange power and quickly apologizes, saying she never meant to use it on a child. Lloyd instantly identifies it as poison, but is shocked when his purification magic fails to work. Her attack causes intense pain, and she apologizes again, revealing that her poison cannot be purified. Lloyd, who believed purification magic could neutralize all known poisons, realizes that what she's using must be an unknown toxin. What's even more astonishing is that she's transmuting the nature of her poison with mana. Some rare individuals are born with a special type of mana. Those with especially dangerous powers are feared and known as the Blithered. The girl confirms she's one of them, a poison Blithered, known as the Venomous Moth Queen. Lloyd is stunned as she breaks through his barrier. He realizes Rain must have weakened him with her poison. Rain assures him he'll be fine since he didn't ingest much of it, though he'll definitely feel the pain in the coming days. Rain takes her leave, and Lloyd is surprised she was able to completely hide her presence. Grim arrives, telling Lloyd it's no time to be impressed. Lloyd says he's fine, his body is constantly healing. Grim then asks why he didn't stop the girl, and Lloyd explains he let her go to track her back to her hideout. Grim has no clue who they are, so Lloyd reveals that Silpha told him about the Assassin's Guild. He's certain Rain is one of them. The guild consists of 6 assassins, each with a bounty on their head, but what excites Lloyd most is that each of them possesses unique abilities. Lloyd tracks where she went, and Grim can't believe he's able to trace someone who's supposed to be undetectable. Lloyd explains that her presence is like a tear in space. He follows Rain, just as Silpha arrives late to the scene. Elsewhere, Rain is confronted for not eliminating her target. However, she shares that she gathered useful intel. They're mass-producing enchanted swords, clearly preparing for war. But this only angers one of the assassins, who tells her to stop acting like she's their leader Jade, since he's been gone for a long time. Rain argues that Jade isn't coming back, but they're quickly told to stop arguing, they're being watched. Lloyd then reveals himself, surprising Rain, since he's still poisoned. The assassins had heard rumors that Lloyd pretends to be unremarkable, but is actually incredibly powerful. Regardless, none of that matters. Lloyd found them, so he can't be allowed to leave. Our bold young hero hears this and decides to lower his barrier, prompting Grim to wonder how insane Lloyd must be. Lloyd says he's facing enemies with unique powers, and it'd be a shame if he couldn't experience them for himself. He uses his tracking skill to imitate Tao's fighting technique and tells the assassins to come at him. He fights the first challenger, who is surprised to see Lloyd knows martial arts. This guy is impressively flexible and reveals he can twist his entire body to fit through the smallest spaces. He's known as Babylon the Giant Rat, also called the Knower. Lloyd is fascinated, as the man's body is truly unique, but there's no time to admire it, since someone else approaches Lloyd from behind. The man says his words sink deep, and Lloyd is stunned as his body suddenly becomes unbearably heavy. His name is Crow, the Shadow Raptor, and the mana in his words marks him as a cursed Blithered. Next, the Brute attacks, but it's Crow who ends up shocked, as Lloyd uses sheer strength to break through the curse. Then, Lloyd is caught in a trap, and the large man introduces himself as Galol the Spider. He's known as the Webbreaker, able to transmute the mana around his body into a sticky substance. Lloyd manages to break free and marvels at how unique his opponent's abilities are. Then he is suddenly attacked by a girl, but Lloyd easily dodges her strikes. At that moment, the wild girl stabs herself in the leg, and somehow, Lloyd feels the pain in his own leg. The girl then reveals her name, Thalia, the antenna of Dory, and she explains she has the ability to share pain with anyone she sees. She is known as the Painbreaker. Lloyd can only wonder how exactly her ability works. With the introductions out of the way, Thalia is thrilled to believe she has finally taught Lloyd what fear is. However, she is shocked when Lloyd calmly replies that he feels no fear. What's even more surprising is that Lloyd instantly heals both stab wounds, despite them having pierced all the way through. The boy truly shows how crazy he is when he starts wondering what would happen to Thalia if he healed himself, and whether that healing might affect her too. He then asks if any damage he deals to her would also be reflected back onto him. Lloyd casts enhancement magic to create blades out of some torn fabric, and then uses his tracking ability to mimic Silpha's fighting style. Our eccentric little warrior now tells the assassins to get ready, because he wants to test how well they can defend themselves. The assassins realize that he looks just like the swordswoman who traumatized them in the past, and they're terrified. Lloyd launches his assault, and the assassins are shocked to see he's highly skilled, not only with blades, but also in martial art. What makes this even harder to believe is that they had only heard of Lloyd as a magical prodigy. Lloyd nearly slices Babylon in half, but is impressed when the giant rat relaxes his body at the moment of impact to reduce the damage. The other assassins try to team up against Lloyd, but end up hurting each each other in the process. Lloyd strikes Babylon again with such speed that Babylon can't even say the word stop to force Lloyd to halt. Lloyd then uses a double sparrow strike, and all Babylon manages to say is ball. Lloyd wonders if he would have gone bald had Babylon said that word, but he's just glad he didn't find out. Gallo wants revenge, but his web sticks to everything, putting Thalia in an awkward situation. Lloyd then attacks Thalia, but she reminds him that hurting her means hurting himself too. She assumes he'll back off and is stunned when Lloyd instead grows even more excited to feel what it's like. He sends both of them flying, causing immense damage, but he's happy it worked. The brute then catches Lloyd in his webs, but Lloyd escapes and lands a massive punch charged with thunder energy. By now, Lloyd is bleeding from his mouth, which only makes him seem even crazier when he asks Rain to show him her poison again. Gallo warns him not to push her, she can't control it well, and if she uses it, everyone might be affected. Lloyd notices that none of them seem to have full control over their powers, and Gallo confirms this. He explains that if they had learned to control them, maybe they wouldn't have been forced into becoming outlaws. In a fit of rage, Gallo attacks Lloyd, but Lloyd easily restrains him. Rain tries to rescue Gallo while he cries out in pain, but Lloyd also stops her. She's determined to make Lloyd pay for what he's done to Gallo until Gallo reveals he's actually fine. In fact, he's better than fine. For some reason, he's now in control. Everyone is shocked when Lloyd reveals he engraved a spell directly onto Gallo's back, allowing him to control his power. Lloyd admits he's never cast a spell onto a human body before, but he's glad it worked. Gallo is overwhelmed as his curse finally ends, but Lloyd tells him he's more than just a cursed brute now, because he can control his mana freely. The others watch in awe as Lloyd tells them it's their turn. He engraves the spell onto them too, and they feel relieved to finally gain control over their mana. Crow is the next to break into tears. It's been so long since he could even speak properly. Everyone starts celebrating, but Rain pretends not to care. She claims she's crying for a different reason, but it's clear she's happy she can now wear whatever she wants. Her poison won't destroy her clothes anymore. Lloyd is thrilled because everything seems to be working out, but Rain doesn't like the idea of Lloyd becoming one of them. The others insist they owe him everything and urge her to prepare a proper welcome party for him. Rain tries to point out that Lloyd mass-produced war weapons and stealthily infiltrated an assassin's hideout. She thinks he's way too insane to join them, but Grimm explains that Lloyd only did all of that for fun. Lloyd wants to see what they can do with their powers now that they can finally control them, but Gallo thinks they owe him an explanation first. Lloyd says it's fine, but they insist on telling the full story. Lloyd isn't exactly interested in the history of the Assassin's Guild until Gallo mentions their leader. Their leader was the Ghost Blitherd, a man with the power to teleport. He was known as Jade, the Shadow Wolf. A flashback shows Jade returning to the hideout after his teleportation ability randomly sent him somewhere against his will. It's a terrible curse, and Jade's curse might be the worst of all. On that day, Jade decided they would become the Assassin's Guild. The plan was to take on the dark jobs the Adventurers Guild couldn't or wouldn't handle. We then see that they used to leave the emblem of the Assassins Guild, a coin, at the scene of their missions, so that people would know their existence was contributing to global peace. The idea was that one day, they wouldn't need to hide anymore and could live freely. Gallo keeps telling the story, but Lloyd only wants to hear more about teleportation powers. Gallo explains that just when things seemed hopeful, they heard rumors that Lloyd was preparing for war, and that's when something happened to Jade. Everyone was stunned when an envelope appeared out of nowhere. Sometime later, Silpha enters the assassin's hideout looking for Lloyd, but he's not there. She can still smell his scent and realizes a note has been left behind. The note is from Lloyd. He explains that he went to visit the Lord of the Lordest, along with the Assassin's Guild. Albert trembles with fear as he reads the letter, wondering how this could have happened. He worries that the Lordist and the Assassins might be working together and that they may have taken Lloyd hostage. The Lordist tries to calm him down, and Albert agrees that going to war with the Lordist isn't the answer. War should be the absolute last resort, so Albert swears he'll find a peaceful resolution until the very end. They both fear the worst and immediately forget everything they just said. The two instantly agree. War is the only option. Elsewhere, we see that Lloyd is not the hostage. In fact, he's the one leading the charge. It's then revealed that the mysterious letter was actually from Jade. He explained that he had overthrown the rulers of Lordest who were preparing for war, and now he is the new lord. Jade had finally achieved his goal, and that's why he invited the other members of the Assassins Guild to the Lord's mansion to celebrate. He wanted everyone to live together again, and the Assassins were overjoyed, because Jade was fulfilling the promise he had made. Galil thanked Lloyd for helping them, and swore they would repay him someday. However, Rain had a request for Lloyd. She asked if he could come with her to imprint the spell on her too. Lloyd didn't mind helping her, but he revealed something suspicious. He pointed out that the letter had been teleported with precision to the exact spot where they were. That level of relocation magic is one of the most complex topics in magical theory, and no one has ever been able to master it fully. It's not the kind of thing that just happens by chance. The others quickly realize this means Jade lied about not being able to control his power. Now, they begin to wonder, can they really trust him? Could this all be a trap? Rain tries to stay positive, hoping that maybe Jade simply learned to control his power. Either way, Lloyd says he doesn't need to go along with them, disappointing Rain. However, she's shocked when Lloyd suddenly announces he will go, because he's interested in studying the teleportation ability. Rain starts to doubt Jade as well, but Lloyd reassures her. If there's any trouble, he'll handle it. Lloyd tells everyone to follow him, and Galil is moved, saying that Lloyd's kindness knows no bounds. After covering some distance, the group needs to stop and rest. The journey is too exhausting for the Assassins. Lloyd points out they've only been flying for 10 minutes. But since the Assassins aren't used to it, they're already worn out. Lloyd's flight pace stresses the group so much that Babylon ends up bending so far backward, he gets completely stuck. Lloyd agrees to take a break, and Rain immediately runs off to look for food for everyone. She grew up in the forest, and Babylon notices she's clearly trying to show off in front of Lloyd. He reveals that when Rain was very young, her venom accidentally killed her own parents. Left alone in the forest, it was Jade who rescued her. We then see the moment Jade brought Rain to his hideout for the first time. The others were shocked by her wild behavior. She even growled at him, but Jade assured them she would be okay. He had promised he could teach her how to get along with others, and Rain seemed to understand. Jade wrapped Rain in cloth so her poison wouldn't harm anyone, but the others were still uneasy. Cheerfully, Jade simply commented that she smelled like flowers and, ironically, ended up poisoned by her. Everyone was convinced that Rain couldn't live near others, but Jade vowed to live with her no matter what. As Jade held Rain above his head, he asked the others to help raise her. Thalia agreed to give her some clothes, and Galil said he'd become her teacher. Even Babylon joined in, trying to develop a type of food that could neutralize Rain's poison. Touched by her companion's kindness, Rain cried. Jade had already developed a spell to counter her poison and implemented it into her new clothes so she could officially join the group. Rain was moved to tears, and since then, Jade had been like an older brother to her. Lloyd admires the spell Jade inscribed into her clothing and says he'd like to meet him one day. Grim is stunned to hear Lloyd showing genuine interest in another human being, which proves just how powerful Jade must really be. Sometime later, Rain shows everyone the stew she made, though it doesn't look very appetizing. The group jokes that Crow could use his sweaty speeches to make it taste better, but Rain stops him with a venomous punch and demands they try it first. The others try to warn her that Lloyd, being a prince, probably won't enjoy it, but they're all shocked when Lloyd starts eating it without hesitation. He reveals that in his past life, he was broke and had eaten far worse things. To him, Rain's stew tastes great. Seeing this, the others start to warm up to Lloyd and follow his lead, tasting the stew. In truth, Rain had never been able to cook before her poison always contaminated the food, but now, she's overjoyed and hopes Jade can finally taste her cooking one day. Another flashback shows Jade telling everyone that the guild was reconsidering the bounties on their heads. The group cheered, as this meant they might one day live normal lives. However, Jade said he had something to confess. He told them he had always claimed to be a random outcast, but in reality, he was the third son of the Lord of Lordest. The territory of Lordest is ruled by his family, a brutal lineage obsessed with war. Like a pack of bloodthirsty beasts, Jade explained that he had spent years searching for a way to stop the war, which was why he created the group of assassins. He admitted he had manipulated them and apologized. Jade thought he was making a big, dramatic revelation, but was surprised when everyone already knew. The group reacted calmly. Rain, however, was visibly shocked. The others explained that each of them had a painful past, but what really mattered was that Jade had given them hope for a better future. They were excited to help him eliminate his wicked family, but Jade insisted he had to do it alone. He explained that if the guild found out they'd helped him, the bounties on their heads would skyrocket. He couldn't allow that, so he decided to handle it himself. He declared that his body was cursed, and his family was a curse upon the world. His entire life had been marked by tragedy. Still, Jade said he felt blessed to have met his friends. He cried as he confessed that he wanted to live with them all forever, but he knew he couldn't, since his family could launch a war at any moment. He couldn't just ignore that. Jade's only request was that they keep the guild running, even if he never returned from Lordist. However, if he succeeded, he would become Lord of Lordist and turn the territory into a place where the Blithered could live in peace. More importantly, that would mean they could all live together again. Back in the present, Lloyd falls asleep after the meal. The assassins find it funny how easily he can sleep anywhere, but Grimm points out that Lloyd is always surrounded by an incredibly powerful barrier. The group starts to worry that Lloyd might be under the influence of his own family, so they decide to explore the mansion first. Still, they don't want to wake him up, so they plan to leave him outside. The assassins suggest Grimm stay behind to guard him, but he says Lloyd is practically invincible even while asleep. Grimm's bigger concern is that if something happens to the assassins, Lloyd might scold him, so he decides to go with them. They arrive and find what appears to be a perfectly normal party, no signs of aggression in sight. Grimm suggests that they return later with Lloyd, but no one thinks that's a great idea, as they want to introduce him to Jade. Galil agrees and remembers that Jade had mentioned being interested in the Seventh Prince, and at that moment, they are approached by a stranger who announces their arrival to everyone. The assassins feel somewhat out of place, since they never learned proper etiquette. Grimm decides to go look for Lloyd, but Ren becomes nervous at the thought of seeing Jade, and asks him to stay. Then, Jade appears. All the assassins become deeply emotional. He is wearing his old clothes, and they all notice he used his teleportation ability to change. Jade explains that he has just learned to control his power, and everyone is relieved to realize he hadn't lied to them. Grimm encourages Ren to speak to Jade, and everyone is moved when she fails to find the right words to say. Jade tells her he feels the same, and Grimm sees this as the perfect moment to go find Lloyd. However, just before he can leave, Jade speaks up and orders everyone to bow. Shockingly, all the guests at the party are transformed into monsters, and the assassins are forced to fall to their knees. They are horrified to realize this resembles Crow's cursed speech ability, but it is far more powerful. Jade declares that his plan has succeeded and ignores Ren's pleas for an explanation. Jade had promised to hand over some bleeders to the monsters, and this malicious figure even forgets Ren's name. At that moment, Grimm launches an attack against Jade and orders the assassins to escape. He considers telling them to bring Lloyd, but realizes the situation is so severe that it might be better to tell Lloyd to flee as well. Grimm uncovers the truth behind what is happening, but before he can say anything, Jade hurls him away with a single kick. He mocks the idea of a mere demon interfering and calls Grimm a fool. Deep in the forest, Grimm crashes near Lloyd, completely horrified by what he just witnessed. He now understands what Jade is plotting and calls the assassins wretched. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Ren begs Jade to explain what is going on, and the monsters mock her for being so naive. At that moment, demons emerge from the monsters' bodies, and Jade reveals he brought them from the underworld. But then the truth is exposed. This is not Jade, his real name is Geyzarm, and he came from the underworld to this region because he desperately wanted something, and what he desired was Jade's body, specifically his teleportation ability. Ren is horrified when Geyzarm reveals that Jade is dead, because he took full control of Jade's body. To make things worse, Geyzarm explains that it took him months to destroy Jade's mind. He torments Ren by saying that Jade screamed in agony as he emptied out his heart. Ren becomes furious, but Geyzarm silences her without effort. He continues torturing them while explaining that Jade had begged him not to harm his friends. Jade deeply cared for them, and thinking of them was the only thing that helped him resist Geyzarm's control for as long as he did. As Guy's control over Jade's body grew stronger, he began to learn about the bleeders. Geyzarm realized that their bodies would be perfect for his demon army, and so he tricked the assassins into coming as well. Jade knew this and decided to take his own life, believing that doing so would also eliminate Guy's arm. The demon allowed him to go through with it, just to make him suffer, but in the final moment, he healed the body. Now he mocks Jade for having wasted his resolve, as the demons around him laugh at his pain. Ren demands they be quiet, but Guy's arm continues. He explains that Jade tried to end his life in many different ways afterward, reliving hell over and over again, but it only wore down his mind faster, until eventually, he simply ceased to exist. Ren can't take it anymore, but Guy's arm doesn't care. He even crushes the gift Jade had once given him. The demons are eager to take possession of the assassins' bodies, but Guy's arm warns them to be cautious. He says their abilities are dangerous, and then they all laugh. When he mentions that Ren ended her own parents' lives with poison, the other assassins become enraged, knowing how much pain that caused her, and now this monster is using Jade's voice to mock her. They all desperately want to attack Guy's arm, but their bodies simply won't move. Just before Guy's allows the demons to begin choosing their hosts, he notices a mark on Ren's body that wasn't present in Jade's memories. Guy's arm uses his cursed speech to try and force Ren to reveal who altered her condition, but he grows frustrated when she resists. Ren manages to fight back by biting her own lip until it bleeds, and Guy's realizes she's doing this to protect her companions. Clever and resilient, just as he feared, he forces her to have a vision with Jade. She says she's able to control her poison thanks to a spell someone placed on her. Guy's doesn't quite know what to make of this, so he uses his cursed speech on her again, causing excruciating pain. He commands her to hand over her friends, demanding to know who cast the spell on her, and she screams in agony. At that moment, a light shines in the night sky. All the assassins are stunned when a barrier envelops them. Guy's tries to figure out what's happening, but it's already too late. A massive attack strikes the mansion, leaving behind a gigantic crater and shocking everyone. Guy's is devastated to realize it was Lloyd who saved them. Lloyd then asks what Guy's was so desperate to find out, revealing that he was the one who placed the spell. The demons begin to tremble with fear as they stare at the enormous hole in the ground. Ren sobs as she explains what happened to Jade. Lloyd gently calms her while healing her wounds and says that Grimm had already told him everything. It's clear now that Guy's is after him. Lloyd tells the assassins to escape, he'll handle things from here. Ren is heartbroken at the idea of fleeing, but Lloyd emphasizes that demons are swarming everywhere. Even worse, Guy's is a monster beyond his comprehension. All the demons search the crater in a panic, afraid that Guy's might no longer be alive. Then Guy's suddenly reappears, launching one of the monsters into a pool of lava. He terrifies the remaining demons, demanding to know what they're doing standing around. He reminds them that assassins are masters of stealth. If they lose track of them now, they may never be able to find them again. Guy's orders them to chase the assassins, warning them that if they fail, they'll be killed. The demons rush after the assassins, but Lloyd steps forward and declares that he won't let anyone leave. He unleashes another unbelievably powerful attack. The blast lights up the entire area, and the assassins realize this is Lloyd's doing. The demons call him a maniac, and Guy's uses his cursed speech to command, "Die." A powerful attack is launched directly at Lloyd. Lloyd is shocked to see the attack pass through his barrier. This crazy kid even considers letting the attack hit him just to see what would happen. Grimm yells at him to dodge, and Lloyd finally complies. The attack ends up hitting one of the demons instead. Lloyd analyzes the spell and discovers that it causes instant death by triggering cardiac arrest in its target. Grimm pleads for Lloyd to flee and warns him that Guy's can use mana to attack without casting spells, just like Crow's cursed speech, but far more efficient. The fact that the attack is formed directly from mana is what allows it to bypass Lloyd's magical barrier. Lloyd could usually dominate someone's mana if they were like Pazuzu, but Guy's attack might actually be strong enough to pierce his heart. Grimm explains that demons are ranked by class, from 10 to 1. Guy's minions are class 10 demons, which is why magic still works on them. Pazuzu was class 8. Grimm himself is class 3. Lloyd guesses that Guy's is class 1, but Grimm reveals that it's much worse than that. Guy's belongs to a terrifying tier known as the royalty of the underworld. Even elite class 1 demons wouldn't stand a chance against him. These beings are living calamities, disasters in physical form. On that scale, even Lloyd might be in danger this time. But Grimm is shocked when Lloyd simply flies up to meet Guy's head-on. Guy's says he knows Lloyd is the 7th prince, thanks to Jade's memories. He explains that Jade had wanted to meet Lloyd. Lloyd is visibly upset that Guy's ruined that chance. Guys complains that Lloyd ruined his celebration by punching a hole in the floor. Grim is terrified as he watches Lloyd clearly prepare to fight. Lloyd says he doesn't like the way Guys is hunting down the assassin guild. Both of them say they just want to have some fun, but everyone knows this is about to turn into a deadly battle. Grim makes one last desperate attempt to convince Lloyd to flee, because the odds are overwhelmingly against him. However, Lloyd has already realized something important. He won't be able to destroy Guys as easily as he did the demons on the ground. Grim is stunned that Lloyd considered defeating them easy. Even class 10 demons are extremely strong, with a natural resistance to magic. But Guys is on a completely different level. High pressure mana, which would feel like a crushing wave to most, is barely a ripple to him. Just then, Guys fires an attack at Lloyd, and Grim is astonished to see it nearly break through Lloyd's ultra-durable barrier. What's even more terrifying is that Guys is breaking through multiple barrier layers, with just tiny fragments of his mana. Intrigued by Lloyd's barrier, Guys summons even larger mana spears and prepares to test its limits. He launches the attack, and Lloyd does everything he can to dodge it. The spears cause massive damage everywhere, but Lloyd does his best to avoid getting hit. At that moment, Grim is shocked when Lloyd has to stop because Guys teleported right in front of him. Guys then kicks the barrier, and Grim is surprised he managed to break it with a normal kick. The demon then combines the spears to create a massive attack, but Lloyd is able to block it with one of his giant statues. The assassins can't believe the insane fight they're witnessing, and the lesser demons notice their targets are right there. They go after the assassins, and Babylon runs to open the gate. Ren worries about Lloyd, and we see Grim crying in fear. Lloyd tells him to calm down because he needs something. Guys is surprised he managed to pressure Lloyd using his teleportation, but Lloyd points out that the teleportation isn't even his own. He says it's Jade's power, and Jade was never able to control it, but he can. Humans seem incapable of using this ability without the help of a spell from Lloyd. However, Guys explains that for his species' natural masters of mana controlling abilities is simple. He pities the blighted, born with powers but without the wisdom to use them. Guys believes they should be happy to sacrifice themselves, as a blighted is only complete when they become a vessel for a demon. Guys plans to show him what true power is and wonders if Lloyd will defend, dodge, or run. At that moment, Lloyd is shockingly pierced in the chest by Guy's spear. Guys reveals Lloyd never had a choice. With no way to fight back, Guys sends several more spears that pierce Lloyd. Nearby, Galio reminds the other assassins that Lloyd gave them the ability to control their powers. They can't fight, so Galio begins to trap the demons attacking them. His webs harden like stone in seconds, but the demons claim that's more than enough time to kill a few humans. However, Crow doesn't give them the chance and forces them to the ground. Abelin opens the gate so they can escape, but Galio is shocked when the demons break free of his webs. They say the assassins can't escape, but Thalia positions all the demons within her line of sight to use her ability and attack them all at once. Thalia thanks Lloyd for helping her control her power and asks her friends to stay out of her line of sight. She admits she doesn't have enough control to avoid hurting others, so she tells everyone to flee. Thalia intends to hold off the demons, but Ren points out she won't be able to escape after cutting her own leg. The demons realize Thalia can hurt them by injuring herself, but tell her not to get close, they'll just heal. But Thalia strikes again. They realize her power is extremely dangerous, and Thalia tells her friends to leave once more, promising she won't let the demons take her body. Ren refuses to leave her side, but Galio pushes Elio and Crow to safety and shuts the gate. Thalia tells Galio to leave too, but Galio insists she won't be able to deal with all the demons alone. Thalia realizes how serious the situation is and is shocked that Galio already knows what she's planning. She intends to take her own life so her power will eliminate all the demons, and Galio has decided to go down with her. The demons are stunned upon hearing her plan and try to stop her, but Galio forces them back. Thalia prepares to end her life, but Ren begs her to stop. Ren knows Jade will never come back, but says that now they can control their powers, and they're much closer to living in the outside world. Even so, Thalia knows what she must do and tells the demons not to underestimate what the guild is willing to do for one another. Ren then calls out to her friends, but it's too late. Thalia went through with her plan. Back to Lloyd, Guys celebrates his victory. He mocks the blighted for dreaming of living in the open and only wishes they had entertained him a bit longer. Guys prepares to end everyone else's lives. Lloyd is stunned when his body dissolves. At that moment, the real Lloyd suddenly appears, and Guys has to dodge his attack. Lloyd was using a decoy. Guys is pleased to see they're still just talking, but then he's surprised when Lloyd asks if they can take the fight elsewhere. Then we see Thalia's sacrifice was stopped just in time when a rain of flaming arrows strikes the demons. No one has any idea what's happening. Albert crosses through the gate and reveals that he brought the battle with him. Ren feels relieved to see the second prince, and Albert commands his enchanted body of swords to move forward and save his brother. In a flashback, we see Silpha undergoing some training. She strikes some straw dummies that had been compressed with magic to their limit, but she's worried about something whenever she uses her full strength. The sword ends up bending. At this rate, she won't be able to use her true power in battle, because the swords won't be able to withstand it. That's why Silpha holds back her real power. She knows she can't keep doing this if she wants to defeat demons like Pazuzu. Back in the present, the assassins are happy to receive help, but they're shocked when Albert declares they need to deal with the assassins first. Silpha demands they tell her where Lloyd is and threatens to cut off one of their heads every minute they remain silent. They begin explaining that Lloyd is fighting the demon leader on their behalf, but Babylon reminds Ren of what they once told Lloyd. He had been very cautious and told them that in the unlikely event someone from the castle showed up, they shouldn't say anything about his strength or the existence of Grimm. Lloyd had explained that he didn't want to draw attention and only wanted to focus on studying magic. The assassins don't know what to say, but time is running out and one of them is about to lose their head. They tell her Lloyd is fighting a loser, but that's not a good enough answer for Silpha, and she prepares to send Ren's head flying. However, Prince Albert stops her, and the assassins feel confident that the kind-hearted Prince Albert will believe them, but they're stunned when Albert says he just doesn't want Silpha to kill a child first. Albert is furious they left Lloyd's clothes behind as a threat, and Galileo only makes things worse with a terrible explanation of what actually happened. At that moment, Ren interrupts and declares she'll accept any punishment. However, the demons took someone important to her, and that's why Lloyd is helping them. She pleads for them to believe her, and her words seem to reach Silpha. At that moment, a demon tries to attack Ren, but Alieza shows up and saves her. Alieza believes Ren, especially because her familiar would have gone berserk if it had sensed ill intentions. Fortunately, Albert decides to believe her too. He'll handle the demons, and for that reason, he orders Silpha to go find Lloyd. However, Ren can't allow Silpha to witness Lloyd's immense fighting ability, so she stops her by saying Lloyd is fighting a weak enemy and doesn't need help. Silpha is determined to go anyway, but everyone is shocked when something destroys the bridge the demons are trying to surround them, so Albert orders everyone to retreat. Silpha is furious because she's very close to Lloyd. It turns out that the one who destroyed the bridge was Lloyd himself. Guys tries a sneak attack on him, but Lloyd dodges it effortlessly. Grimm is so terrified that he has no idea what's going on, especially because there's something very strange about Lloyd's sword. Down below, Albert and his men begin attacking the demons, and Lloyd is pleased to see that they can handle them on their own. This means he can fully focus on his fight against Guys. Albert is a bit worried since the demons are resistant to magic, but at least their attacks are causing them some pain. Jean unleashes a powerful strike with his sword, and the demons realize he has significantly more firepower than the others. He's surprised to see the demons can still move after the attack and starts wondering what Albert is planning. Albert's troops will run out of mana if they keep using their enchanted swords at range. All the smoke from the attack is making it hard for their best close combat fighters to get through. At that moment, Albert notices that Silpha has vanished. It turns out she mounted Shiro and ordered him to take her to Lloyd. The assassins say it would be impossible for Shiro to cross the river, so Silpha thinks about tying a rope to him to help. But Shiro, who also really wants to see Lloyd, just leaps anyway and falls straight into the river. Silpha thinks about jumping in too, but a demon in the shape of an egg appears and attacks her. Silpha easily defends herself, impressing the demon, and the assassins are shocked because they can't even follow her movements. The demon then reveals himself to be a Class 8 demon and a practitioner of the demonic blade form. Silpha is only now learning about demon classes and begins to wonder what level Pazuzu might be. Silpha then tries to share some devastating news with the demon, but he believes that nothing she says will be enough to shock him. However, he is mistaken. She bluntly tells them that he has crap for brains. The demon desperately tries to explain that it's just a hat. While Albert realizes the citizens of Lord East have had their bodies taken over by demons, he tries to find a way to save them, but ends up being attacked by more demons. At that moment, he appears, offering to fight at his side. Babylon knows the assassins aren't admirable people, and refuses to accept any excuses. But even so, they do not treat life lightly and will fight for what they believe is right. He explains there's no way to save the citizens of Lord East anymore, because all that's left are demons wearing their bodies like empty suits. Albert thanks him for the advice and makes a decision. He prepares an attack and apologizes to the citizens for arriving too late. Albert finishes his chant and promises to set them free. His attack is incredibly powerful, and enormous fireballs begin to rain down from the sky, burning all the demons. He then turns to his soldiers and declares that the time has come to win this battle. Nearby, Silpha is locked in a fierce battle against a demon shaped like an egg. This opponent is shockingly powerful, and everyone is stunned when he strikes Silpha. He tries using attacks in the style of the Demon Blade, but Silpha meets him blow for blow. Their fight causes massive destruction to the area, and both prepare their most powerful attacks. Their powers collide, and the assassins can only wonder who this maid truly is. Silpha and the demon take damage, but he makes sure to point out that this isn't a fair fight. Demons have the advantage since they can heal and overcome human limitations. Still, this fight makes him change his mind about something. He no longer wants a broken body now. He wants Silpha's body. Silpha is shocked when he suddenly switches to his dominant hand, and she narrowly avoids being struck by the next blow. He's using a fencing style from Lorda's, one that the body's original owner once used. The demon mocks the young man, claiming both his memories and body belong to him now. But he didn't expect Silpha to counterattack, and she quickly gains the upper hand, taking him by surprise. The assassins cheer her on, and right after that, Shiro returns to the bridge. But the demon believes Shiro won't make any difference. That's when Silpha reaches into Shiro's flesh and says she's going to put something to good use. She pulls out a sword. A quick flashback shows Lloyd handing her that sword. Lloyd and Diane crafted it together, but it doesn't have any flashy spells or inscriptions on it. It was made solely to be as durable as possible, able to endure all of Silpha's full power. Lloyd was certain that, with that sword, she'd be able to take down a demon. Demons are psychic entities and can't do much without a physical body, so they either build artificial ones or possess human. If the body they're using is destroyed, the demon vanishes too. When a body is under demon control, it becomes absurdly powerful, requiring an extremely strong attack to inflict any real damage. And even if it's wounded, it can still regenerate. That's why the only way to truly defeat a demon is with a fatal blow. Lloyd had always noticed that Silpha was holding back when using a sword. He believed she couldn't fight at full power because she feared breaking her own weapon. Silpha is deeply impressed that Lloyd noticed this and thanks him for the sword. She decides to name it Demon Bane, to always remember not to let him down again. The demon mocks the name, convinced Silpha's fate is sealed. Silpha then reveals that the war was staged in order to trick Jade and force her to return to Lourdes. The assassins are furious when they realize the demons used Jade's fear of war against him. Ren is the angriest and, without thinking twice, tries to attack the egg-shaped demon, but Silpha effortlessly stops her, assuring them that she'll handle everything herself. She then assumes a fierce battle stance. The demon decides to use his secret technique Demon Blade form. They clash violently, but everyone is stunned when Silpha cuts the demon clean in half. Meanwhile, an exhausted Jade watches the battle unfold and says that he finally managed to do something. Guys believes Jade is just trying to accept his own death, but Jade replies that he won't let him go unpunished. He declares that Guys will lose, but dies before revealing who will be his executioner. Guys then fully takes over Jade's body and begins scouring through his memories. He finds images of his friends, but something inside blocks him from seeing everything. Knowing Jade hated war, Guys decides the demons will start a massive conflict. Back in the present, Silpha has defeated the egg demon and apologizes to the swordsman whose body was possessed. To her surprise, the assassins are crying, and she comments that they don't even seem like real assassins. At that moment, the river begins to evaporate, and thick steam takes over everything. Lloyd can't see anything and wonders if he made the wrong decision. Going back in time a little, we see Lloyd analyzing the battle against Guys. The enemy's spears can pierce through simple or even double barriers with ease. If Lloyd gets hit, it's all over, and to make matters worse, Guys can also use cursed incantations that ignore any kind of defense. Normally, those chants are slow, but he's combining them with incredibly fast spear attacks. The most dangerous move in the game is Shadow Wolf, which forces Lloyd to keep moving constantly. If he stops for even 1 second, Guys teleports a direct strike right to him. Lloyd realizes that no matter how powerful Guys is, He's just attacking non-stop without rest. So instead of staying on the defensive, he decides to go on the offensive. But he needs to act in under 2 seconds to avoid being hit by Shadow Wolf. He charges forward, and Guys is impressed by his speed. Still, he doesn't worry, he's confident he can withstand the attack. However, he doesn't want to burn his clothes, so he dodges. And that's exactly what Lloyd wanted. His strike hits the river, and steam spreads everywhere. Now Lloyd is frustrated, since Guys can teleport to any location. He needs to constantly use spectral detection to locate him. Grim then warns him to keep moving, and Lloyd takes to the air. But then, he has an idea. He realizes some time has passed, and Guys hasn't used Shadow Wolf, which means the enemy can't see where he is. Lloyd recalls that Guys was afraid the assassins would escape, because he wouldn't be able to track them afterward. In other words, Guys is completely dependent on his line of sight to teleport his attacks. And now, with the steam blocking his vision, Lloyd can move undetected. Grim gets worried when Lloyd stops moving, but notices Guys isn't looking either. Lloyd wants to get close enough to strike with his sword, but he knows that if he gets too close, Guys will notice. From Guy's perspective, he only needs to wait for Lloyd to move. And when that moment comes, Lloyd unexpectedly uses multiple illusionary clones. Guys can't tell which one is real and lets himself get hit. But in an instant, he realizes the real Lloyd is the one whose sword isn't made of earth, and he strikes immediately. Guys praises Lloyd for attempting a physical attack, knowing magical attacks don't work against him. Still, he laughs as he says even physical blows won't hurt him, because no matter what damage Lloyd causes, Guys can regenerate instantly. He can also harden his body to be as tough as iron, and he deliberately let Lloyd stab him just to identify the real one. Guys says Lloyd can be proud of himself in the afterlife, since he managed to, but his villain monologue doesn't go too well, because Lloyd's clones haven't vanished yet. And now, Guys is shocked to see that the Lloyd he attacked was also a fake, meaning Lloyd gave a real sword to a clone to deceive him. Guys tries to guess where the real Lloyd is. He suspects he's hiding in the sky, but he's completely wrong. The real Lloyd attacks from behind. Just when he thinks his plan is working, Guys disagrees, regenerating instantly. He teleports some clothes onto his body, and we learn more about his powers. Guys can teleport objects without seeing them, but only if he knows exactly where they are. Lloyd explains that his clones are practically useless, meant only for silly tricks. There are many ways this could go wrong for him, which makes his plan extremely risky. Grim is terrified, and Guys chooses a simpler approach. He'll attack all of Lloyd's clones at once. This strike should reveal the real Lloyd, since Guys is sure he'd use a barrier to protect his actual body. However, that also turns out to be another clever trick. So Guys continues his assault. He tries to understand what Lloyd is planning. Suddenly, he becomes excited as he realizes this fight is way more thrilling than facing entire demon legions. He's convinced that Lloyd is enjoying himself too, so he summons even more clones. In the shadows, Grim is horrified as he understands Lloyd's plan. He knew that Guys would attack the clones, thinking Lloyd would shield his real body with a barrier. So Lloyd decided not to use any barrier at all. Instead, he's using an obscure technique to hide his presence, doing everything he can to avoid being struck by the spears. It's incredibly dangerous, and Grim wonders what could possibly justify such a reckless strategy. Going back a bit in time, we discover what's so special about the sword Lloyd is using. It has a magical inscription that allows it to absorb spells. The wielder can either absorb the spell to increase their own mana or to analyze it. Back in the present, Grim realizes that Lloyd is trying to decipher the incantation required to use the Shadow Wolf technique. That teleportation spell Jade spent his entire life trying to understand, without success. Trying to do something like that in the middle of such a dangerous battle is completely reckless. Human, even. So Grim begs Lloyd to give up and run, but he quickly realizes that Lloyd would never run away from an unknown spell. Lloyd is simply a maniac when it comes to magic. So Grim changes his stance and starts hoping that Lloyd will actually be able to defeat Guys. Lloyd uses the spell tracker technique to analyze the magic and searches for traces of Jade within it. He tries calling out to Jade, telling him that all his friends are waiting for him. Lloyd reveals himself to Guys, who suddenly realizes he's not protected by a barrier. He notices a cut on his cheek. Lloyd explains that he noticed something important, which is why he stopped using clones altogether. Guys assumes that Lloyd realized he can't win this fight, and demands to know why he's still fighting. He acknowledges that Lloyd is different from everyone else, and says that the two of them are alike. Guys tries to convince Lloyd to join him, but he is immediately rejected. Lloyd admits that Guys is indeed strong, but he emphasizes that strength is all he has. Humans, on the other hand, are weak, and they spend their whole lives trying to overcome their limits. But that's exactly what makes them capable of creating amazing things. Magic is the perfect example of that. It was born from people's desire to control elements like fire or flight. Every spell ever crafted is deeply rooted in the dreams of its creator. That's why sorcery is endlessly fascinating to Lloyd. But Guys doesn't care about any of that, he just wants to end the fight quickly. The problem is that Lloyd completely overwhelms him. The pain is unbelievable, and Lloyd explains that this was a strike, using only essential core techniques. Guys has no idea what that even means. But he's even more shocked when he realizes that Lloyd predicted exactly where he would teleport in order to land the blow. Lloyd says he's grown tired of Guy's repetitive attacks, and taunts him, daring him to stop wasting time and use something new. That infuriates Guys. How dare a human give orders to a demon like Lloyd? But then Lloyd mentions Jade's last words. Guys doesn't take it seriously at first, but Lloyd explains that Jade said Guys would lose. That enrages Guys even more, but before he can react, Lloyd simply throws him into the air. Lloyd's assault is brutal, and though Guys tries to stay composed amidst the screams of pain, the truth is that Lloyd's strikes hurt badly. Still, Guys remembers that he can just regenerate, and that should bring him some relief, right? But he's wrong. There's an even bigger problem. Lloyd keeps dominating the fight completely, not giving Guys even a second to recover. Lloyd uses a double launch technique to prepare his next strike. The impact sends Guys flying toward the castle, and before he can even stabilize himself, Lloyd is already on top of him again. Guys panics as he sees magma directly beneath him, but he can't figure out exactly where he is. Falling into the magma would be catastrophic, so he tries to find a path through line of sight to escape. But Lloyd was already one step ahead and delivers another devastating attack. In that moment, Lloyd reflects on his passion for magic, something that has always fascinated him both in this life and the last. He's always been curious about the people behind spells, how they were crafted, and now he feels that same curiosity about Jade. Guys is in unbearable pain, and Lloyd declares that this fight has been extremely boring for him. With no more options left, Guys begins preparing his final attack, and reveals what truly separates a basic demon from a Lloyd-class demon: the ability to freely manipulate atmospheric mana. By concentrating all the mana in the area, Guys creates an attack capable of reducing anything to nothingness. Its name is Black Sphere of Mordo, and this spell is absolutely terrifying, but Lloyd makes it vanish effortlessly. Guys falls into despair as he searches for his missing Black Sphere, completely unable to understand what happened. Lloyd calmly explains that he simply erased the attack using a similar technique. Guys refuses to believe that's even possible, but Lloyd reveals the name of his spell, Void. That spell can launch the target into another dimension and pulverize it completely. Lloyd says he learned that spell a long time ago, and only now realized that it operates under the exact same principle as Guy's Black Sphere. And like any true lover of magic, he was curious to see what would happen if the two techniques collided, so he simply made them clash. Guys is left utterly unhinged. Creating a single black sphere already requires an absurd amount of mana, and Lloyd had conjured two just to test them. But to Lloyd's surprise, when the two collided, they simply cancelled each other out. That was quite disappointing. And now he's equally disappointed with Guys, because this battle has already lost all meaning. Guys, on the other hand, is boiling with rage, while Lloyd doesn't even pay attention to his furious speech. Guys tries to attack once more, but the moment he touches Lloyd, he's overwhelmed by an absolute fear. Even Grimm, who believed he understood Lloyd's power, realizes he was completely mistaken. Lloyd is on an entirely different level. From Lloyd's perspective, Guys only has one more use: to serve as the target of yet another magical experiment. He wants to see what happens when Guys is struck simply by the void. Guys is consumed by immense dread as Lloyd delivers the final blow. Meanwhile, as Sylph was fighting the demons, something strange begins to happen. They start moving slowly, very slowly. There's also a sweet aroma in the air, and Ren seems to say not to breathe in too deeply. It's her poison, and she's doing everything she can to keep it from reaching her friends. Albert thinks the fight would go better if the sun rose, and he realizes the sun should have already appeared. They assume it's all the mist, but soon notice that dark clouds are covering the sky. Guy screams in agony, the damage being too great for him to regenerate, and his shadow wolf is not functioning either, so he decides to abandon Jade's body. However, there's no escaping the void. Guys then pretends to be the real Jade. He claims the void removed Guys from his body and begs Lloyd to stop the attack. He pleads for the other assassins to attack Lloyd in his place. Lloyd knows exactly what to do and crushes Guys. Grim simply sighs as Jade's spirit lingers for a moment before vanishing. Ren looks up at the sky and remembers that Jade once told them about a rumor concerning the seventh prince. The newspapers claimed there had been a firework accident on the day of his birth, but the rumors suggested it may have been a spell cast by the seventh prince at the moment of his birth. The other assassins believed this. They thought that if the rumors were true, then a prodigy like the seventh prince could free them from their curses. They all had a friendly discussion, and the big guy offered to serve the seventh prince for the rest of his life if he could save them. Ren smiles uncontrollably as she remembers how Jade wanted them all to live freely together. After the battle, Lloyd builds a grave for Jade, but Grim points out how distant the grave is compared to the others. Lloyd explains that the void consumes everything and that there was no body left to bury, so this is more of a memorial. Grim is impressed that Lloyd managed to strike the void, since it moves so slowly. Lloyd then explains that he only succeeded because he deciphered Guy's Shadow Wolf spell. He created a spell to detect when it was being used and linked it to his reflexes, so he could dodge and pursue automatically. Grim can't believe Lloyd managed to break down such a complex spell in the middle of an intense battle, but Lloyd admits that he was being very cautious, and Guy's was incredibly powerful. Lloyd was fortunate because the Shadow Wolf spell had been clearly exposed to him. That's because, in the end, Jade managed to transcribe the full spell for the Shadow Wolf and left it behind, knowing that someone would take on the challenge of finding a way to defeat it. Lloyd declares that it wasn't he who won this fight, but Jade. Ray listens beside him, and his words move her deeply. She wants Lloyd to know just how grateful she is. But Albert arrives to speak with him. Lloyd tries to hide whom the grave is for, but Albert already knows it belongs to the leader of the Assassin Guild. However, Albert doesn't know the full story, so Lloyd realizes the assassins must have made up a version to protect their secret. Albert still knows that Lloyd defeated a demon, so he feels proud of his little brother's strength and kindness. Unfortunately, life is complicated, and the Assassin Guild must be taken into custody. Ray expects the same fate once she is found. The assassins committed very serious crimes in the past, and now they've simply taken the prince and forced him into the war. Still, they promise to make amends by serving Lloyd for the rest of their lives. They're determined to fix what they've broken, and Albert feels they don't need to be restrained. At that moment, everyone is shocked. When Albert points his sword at Lloyd and says the situation is very serious, he says this won't be like having a pet. If the assassins become his servants and commit a terrible act, Lloyd will be held responsible. The assassins begin to fear that Lloyd might not want them, but Lloyd decides that he will take full responsibility for them. Lloyd is certain that this is truly what he wants. Everyone is surprised when a gust of wind blows at that exact moment. Albert wants to make sure that Lloyd understands that people truly care about him, so he tells him not to keep his distance so much. He promises to always be by Lloyd's side whenever he needs him, and for that reason, he wants Lloyd to ask for help more often. More important than being a prince, Lloyd is his brother above anything else. And Albert tells Lloyd just how much he loves him, and everyone watches the beautiful moment unfold. Right then, Tao appears out of nowhere asking if Lloyd and Albert are okay. She ran there the moment she heard Lloyd was in trouble, and told everyone not to worry anymore because she was finally there. However, she realizes that the battle has already ended. Judging by the grave and the empty look on everyone's faces, Tao runs away embarrassed, but the others go after her to thank her for what she did the other day. Grim is surprised to see that Lloyd genuinely wants the assassins to be his mentors. Lloyd tries to say he's only interested in their parties, but Grim notices it's something more than that. Sometime later, a tea party is held, but Tao is extremely nervous due to all the royalty present. Albert assures her that she can relax, but Tao ends up getting a bit too comfortable and makes a mistake. When she calls Silpha a stupid maid and orders her to serve tea, the two begin to argue, and the assassins say they enjoy lively parties like this. Some of the party guests drink a bit too much, and end up holding a farewell toast to Jade. Thalia wants Albert to have a drink, but he points out that he's conducting official business by keeping an eye on the assassins. However, Thalia insists and uses her ability to share her drink with Albert. Everyone is shocked to see that she actually did it and wonder what might happen next. Albert becomes furious when he remembers that the assassins never explain why they were wearing Lloyd's clothes. Everyone is enjoying themselves, but they suddenly notice that Silpha is nowhere to be seen. That's because the girls have returned to the castle and are enjoying the hot, steaming water like a proper bath. Ren says she wants to work for Lloyd, just like Silpha, but Silpha tells her that she needs to ask Lloyd directly. Ren is surprised when Lloyd shows up right there and allows her to stay by his side. Silpha explains that she dragged Lloyd into the bath because he was filthy and covered in dirt. She stops Lloyd from slipping away quietly, and Ren questions whether it would really be right for her to stay by Lloyd's side. After all, she has hurt many people in the past, and to make matters worse, she's poisonous. Ren is shocked when Lloyd bluntly tells her that she still has a lot to improve, and that she should start by no longer calling herself a Blizzard. He explains that if she learns to truly understand her ability, she could become a pharmacist or create medicine. Ren finds it hard to believe she could actually help people with her skill, and Lloyd says he needs to study her more. Ren's mind fills with memories of all the people who hated her because of her poison, of how she even hated herself. But Lloyd accepted her without hesitation, and only now does she realize that Lloyd never once called her a failure. Lloyd advises her to work hard before he leaves, and Ren promises she'll give it her all. Later on, everyone gets ready to meet with the king, and Lloyd fears he might be in trouble. But the king is actually very proud of his sons. Meanwhile, in the basement, Ren is doing some cleaning, and feels happy to see that Lloyd is doing what he loves the most, which is learning about magic. And that's where our video ends. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. And leave a comment down below saying, "I love magic," so we'll know you watched it all the way to the end. Take care, and see you next time.